This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Hey, what's good, everybody? Welcome to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Hustler with you, Andrew Paterson, along with the CTO, Michael Remis. And got a great show coming up. Lots of local hockey talk on the docket today. Big win for the Jets last night, 2-0 on this road trip. Huge game tomorrow night against the Colorado Avalanche. We'll break it all down with our guy, Murat of The Athletic, a little later on in the program. We'll also check in on the Manitoba Moose, who played in a quiet building last night. One that we could actually hear through the TSN broadcast of the Jets and Coyotes because of everything that's going on. But the Moose split their series against the Iowa Wild, losing in a shootout last night. And Dan Fink is going to join us. We'll talk a little bit more about where the Moose are at, as well as some of the Moose players that have sort of graduated, at least temporarily, to the Winnipeg Jet lineup. So really looking forward to that. A number of other topics that we will touch on later on the program. And of course, we'll get to last night's win over the Desert Dogs at the Gila River Arena down in Glendale, Arizona. As we get going, welcome everybody into the chat. Great to see you, as well as everybody listening on the podcast. By the way, podcast listeners, if you haven't done this before and you do have the opportunity, help your boys out, especially if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, on an iPhone or an iPod. If you could just go down and give us a 5-star rating, a little review, certainly helps us spread the channel. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that red subscribe button and give us a little thumbs up if you don't mind. Speaking of thumbs up, 2 thumbs up and a big thank you to all the sponsors that make WST happen every day, including F Apparel, Vita Health, Culligan Water, Manitoba Battery, Royal Sports, Not AutoCorp, Little Brown Jug Brewing, Princess Auto, Boston Pizza, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Canadian Club Whiskey, and of course, Coolbet Canada. Lots to talk about coming out of last night's game, and I'll tell you what, a lot of anticipation for. We were making jokes about how many litmus test games there's been so far this year, but make no mistake about it, huge test tomorrow for the Winnipeg Jets going into Denver to take on the Colorado Avalanche. Let's get Remis back in here and get things going for a Wednesday afternoon. Remis, what's going on?
Feeling good, Huss. I got my shoveling in this morning. I see a lot of people talking about shoveling in chat. Not only is it minus 40 out, or with the wind or whatever it is, we've been getting dumps of snow where, if you don't shovel, I'm like up to my knees walking to my car. So got on my new shovel. I'm feeling pretty good about that.
New shovel? Wow.
Yeah, big. But more importantly, feeling great. Yeah, I bought new shovels to start the season. Best decision I ever made. I am fired up about the Jets when they slayed the dragon, Karel Vejmelka.
Dude.
That name imprinted in my mind. I'm never going to forget the legend that is Karel. How many shots did he get yesterday? Almost 50?
49.
And he led in 2 goals. I thought we were on our way to a repeat of a Vejmelka performance. Until Svechnikov opened up, okay, they got 1. They should be able to win with 1 goal against this Arizona Coyotes team. But I thought the shots were all much better quality shots than the first game between these two teams. He made some big saves on Scheifele on the penalty call, Kyle Connor blasting away or not the power play, not power play. Those guys were blasting away. We can get to Pierre-Luc Dubois, showed off some of that man strength, but they won. I would have liked them to score more on Vejmelka, but just can't beat that guy. He's too good. Imagine him on a good team.
Well, dude, all last night as we got into the third period, the Jets are putting puck after puck on him and making not just routine saves. this was a way better performance for Vejmelka than was the 46-save shutout here in Winnipeg. In the game in Winnipeg, he made maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 really tough saves. The Jets had a ton of great scoring chances last night, and he was up to the task. I couldn't help but one thing, and maybe this is because, we pay attention to the Jets. I don't know how many people have. I mean, unless you're betting on these games, you're not watching the Arizona Coyotes. And if you look at his numbers and whatnot, he just turns into the second coming of Marty Brodeur when he plays the Winnipeg Jets. But that is what we've seen so far. 2 brilliant games by this young goaltender. And all I could think of during the game was Ken Holland should be on the horn right now to Arizona to try to get Carl Vejmelka out to Edmonton right now because they can't get a save. And, if you're a Jets fan that's watched these 2 games against Arizona, you're thinking that you've got a diamond in the rough down in the desert playing on one of the worst teams in the National Hockey League. Now, I realize his results and performances have not been like they've been against the rest of the National Hockey League as opposed to what he's done against the Winnipeg Jets. But it was hard not to watch that game last night and have a few flashbacks to the game, 5 weeks ago here in Winnipeg, just when it came to Vejmelka's performance. And also think that maybe the Coyotes actually do have a really good one right now. Goaltending, a big topic in and around the league. We'll get to this Leafs-Oilers game tonight. And of course, we'll get goaltending, a massive topic, along with coaching, lack of scoring, lack of everything right now for the Edmonton Oilers. And unfortunately for the Oilers, it's going to be the lack of Connor McDavid in the lineup tonight on one of the few Canadian games that's going ahead. Why? Television. Matthews, McDavid. Well, good news for the Leafs and for Rogers is that Matthews is going to be playing, but no McDavid. So, it's just going from bad to worse right now for the Edmonton Oilers. But back to the point, Carl Vejmelka was unbelievable last night. And, he kept his team in a hockey game that, frankly, they didn't really deserve to be in.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you look over the shots on goal, the Jets dominating play. I mean, again, they had a number of power plays where they had shots and had chances, couldn't beat them. It wasn't on the power play, but Dubois did put one in. And I mean, his season, he's almost doubled his goal total from last year. I think he had 9 last year. He's got 15 this year. Was like 1 second after the power play. But I mean, if you had to say who do you think is leading this team in goals on the power play, you would say Kyle Connor from, the right dot.
Not even close.
But Pierre-Luc Dubois, he's got the lead in power play goals. And, they would always have like, Kyle Connor or something down there and when Wheeler was on the right side. And I felt like he wasn't really much of a threat to score. But Pierre-Luc Dubois, he's got 7 power play goals. Morrissey's second with 4. Kyle Connor, he's got 19 goals on the year. Only 2 on the power play, which is actually shocking. That's shocking that only 2 of 19 are on the power play. But Dubois, he's down low. He can pass it up or, to Connor, or he can pass it to the center for Kopp. Or now, he's taking it to the net. And you saw in that goal, just going hard, hits it on Vejmelka. He gets a piece of it. It trickles on the goal line. And I joked to you before the show, it was almost like the reverse Kevin Hayes from Game 4 versus St. Louis in the 2019 playoffs.
Trigger warning, Jets fans.
Sorry to bring it up, but we all remember Kevin Hayes reaching in on a puck on the goal line and pulling it out by accident. But Dubois, he's just got so much man strength. He just went in and found it and poked it in. And I actually was, the ref was right there, saw it in. I didn't have a good angle. I wasn't sure if it was actually in. I thought it might get called back, but that was a huge goal. It was the game-winning goal, 2-1, and you were saying yesterday, bet the Jets on the puck line. Thankfully,
Never in doubt.
They got that empty netter to cover the 1.5 goals. So that's what I thought of when they scored the empty netter. Well, Hustler's going to be really happy.
Yeah, there probably was a few other people that rode with me last night. And again, I rarely bet on the Jets. More for superstitious reasons than anything else. But we did speak about it yesterday and got an amazing number on the puck line the night before. It had dropped considerably because I think a lot of people expected a major bounce back revenge game performance by the Winnipeg Jets. And overall, they put up 49 shots. I really liked the game overall. I think Dave Lowry really liked the game as well. But you know what would be funny, Reem? I don't have the previous game PVR'd anymore. That was erased quickly because I didn't want to be reminded of it. But it would be interesting to compare those 2 games. Both really controlled by the Jets possession-wise. But the 46 shots, I sort of mentioned this off the top of the program, compared to the 49 they had last night were very, very different. And Carl Vejmelka had to be far better last night to keep his team into it. And I'll say this. I mean, Dave Lowry's been speaking about one thing, and he's been talking about a message that they need to be harder to play against. They need to go to where goals are scored. Pierre-Luc Dubois talked about it in his post-game presser last night. Most of the goals are scored within 6 feet of the net. I mean, they're not always beautiful ropes from 30 feet away past goaltenders that end up on the highlight reel. And the Jets, to their credit, have been listening. And tell you what, that is the sort of performance and the ability to generate offense that way that they're going to need come playoff time, presuming they can get in, and certainly in some very, very tough games in the Central Division going forward. So, overall, I think that was what a lot of people wanted to see. Committed 3 periods last night from the Winnipeg Jets, proving that they were a better team. And as I said, full marks to Karl Vejmelka, who will scare the bejesus out of any Winnipeg Jet fan in the future when they hear that he's starting against this hockey club. Because they said the guy turns into the second coming of Patrick Roy, Marty Brodeur, seemingly, when he plays against this club. All that being said, strong game, important 2 points, 2-0 on this road trip, and now they get ready for the Colorado Avalanche tomorrow. We'll get to the Avs. Makar's ridiculous OT winner last night as well, coming up with Murat a little bit later on in the program. But from last night, a couple of guys that I want to single out. Number one, Evgeny Svechnikov. I mean, this could be recency bias, but I think that might have been his best game as a Jet last night. He and that fourth line with Tony Nato and Christian Vesalainen were as good as I think the fourth line's been in any game this season. I mean, they were phenomenal. He was rewarded with a goal early, got a very important goal. With all the penalties and the power plays, they weren't on as much as I think Dave Lowry would have liked, just between 7 and 8 minutes. But I'll tell you what, I mean, if Svechnikov continues to play that way, I'm not sure that he'll be on the fourth line for very long. And I know there's been a lot of talk about, who's on that right wing along with Dubois and Connor. And this goes back to the swap of Wheeler for Svechnikov. At that point, I thought a lot was made out of it. I thought that the success of that line was really because of how great Kyle Connor was playing, as well as Pierre-Luc Dubois. And I still think that is the case. But if Svechnikov continues to play like the way he did last night, he will give the coaching staff no choice but to move him up in the lineup. And again, obviously, numbers are an issue. We'll see what happens when Captain Blake Wheeler comes back. Tell you what, if he stays in that role and those guys play together and they play that way, that is the blueprint for a team that can compete with any team in the National Hockey League, because, certainly what you're getting from your top couple lines. We've talked a lot about Dubois and Connor. I mean, I thought Scheifele and Ehlers had some really good moments last night, and obviously they're playing with Paul Stastny. And right now, Andrew Kopp with Adam Lowry, and in last night's case, Christian Reichel, are in that sort of shutdown role, playing up against the top matchups. If your fourth line can not only generate a goal, but spend as much time in the other team's end, and again, easier done against a team like Arizona than many of the other teams in the NHL, so take that for what it's worth. All I know is that I thought Svechnikov was a deserving star of the game. I believe he got the helmet afterwards. And for a guy that had missed a few games, he really made a statement to the new head coach, Dave Lowry, in his return to the lineup that he's ready to play, and he stepped up and showed up last night for the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the ice time here. You see the distribution. Svechnikov on that fourth line, as you said, almost 8 minutes. The third line, Reichel in there, 10 minutes. And I think what we've needed to see from this team, Huss, is some scoring from the depth guys. And I mean, it was a great play. Josh Morrissey entering the zone, does a little fake shot to, brings over Vejmelka just enough to feed it to Svechnikov. Quick shot, hard, low, got just a piece of it and in the net. And we've seen that a couple times. I think he's got 2 goals. His other goal was some crazy snipe as well. So that guy, he's definitely got a shot. And I guess when he's on, the fourth line, maybe he's going to be more of the guy who's the shooter rather than playing with Dubois and Connor. Maybe he'll defer to them a bit more. But, I mean, great to have him back in the lineup. And, I mean, we still talk about, how did the Jets end up with this guy who's a former first-round pick? Detroit doesn't make too many mistakes. Seems like they let a good one go. And you talk about Dave Lowry. Ken Wiebe wrote it today on sportsnet.ca. Is it official? The Jets can we say they've had the coach bump? They lost the first one. I think we can all agree the team was pretty clearly shell-shocked. They were not themselves in that game against Washington, but now 3 in a row under Dave Lowry. They're 3-1 with him. Is there an official coach? Ken says there's a coach bump. Do you agree? Have the Jets got the coach bump?
Well, ask me after tomorrow night's game. Mm-hmm. You go in and beat the Avalanche and go 3-0 in this road trip, I will officially endorse a coach bump, a coaching change bump for the Winnipeg Jets going forward. The first game, I mean, I don't even know what we can say about that first game. Everyone in the building was stunned, including the players on the ice. And that was, just a strange situation. Definitely a winnable game. I mean, Washington was missing their top 2 centers, but the Jets were still somewhat out of sorts. But coming back, very important win, game number 2 for Lowry on the bench. The one time they'd actually had a chance to practice or catch their breath as opposed to what had happened on Friday morning. That was important. And then 2 weeks off. So far so good with what they've worked on. At least we're seeing it in the games right now. And, for all the people, I mean, there's so many coaching experts out there when it comes to this fan base. And it's no different from any other hockey club, passionate fans. I think it's important to give this guy a chance to see what he can do. He's an interim head coach. He's got an opportunity. He's been working his entire life to do it. It was over 1,000 games in the National Hockey League. He's coached hundreds of games at numbers of different levels. It's his first time as an NHL head coach. And, hey, it's a results-based business. So at the end of the day, you win, you'll be fine. And they've done that so far, 3 in a row for Dave Lowry. And, but most importantly, I think some of the things that he has been preaching, talking about, and they've been practicing are showing up in these hockey games. But moving up a couple weight classes tomorrow, going from Arizona to Colorado to take on the Avalanche. So we will look forward to that. You know what? We'll talk. I know there's a lot of people that want to talk about this Hellebuyck Billeck thing after the game. Stick around. I will get to that maybe in between Dan Fink and when Murat joins us a little bit later on. But I do want to talk about one other guy, Reem, and I don't mean to pick on Logan Stanley. I think regular listeners of this program, certainly that have been with us through March, know that I was sort of the guy that brought up the I don't want to say I championed him being protected in the expansion draft, but I basically just read the room and thought that he would be, with the way that with the way that he was playing, the uniqueness of the sort of player that he is, and how much that would be in demand by other NHL GMs. And it all came to fruition. And he's been in the lineup and he's had some strong games. That was a wood-fired original special that was served up last night on the 1 goal. And you saw, I mean, the minute that thing went in behind Connor Hellebuyck, he sort of looked at the skies and, realized that was a terrible pass that you cannot make. And I'll say this about Logan Stanley. There's a lot of things that he brings to the hockey club, and he'll certainly be on the roster. But I mean, Dave Lowry's going to look at a play like that and realize that there are some players. I mean, Ville Heinola, we'll talk about Johnny Kovacevic as well, and Dylan Sandberg with Daniel Fink coming up. I mean, some talented young defensemen that are certainly making their case that they are ready for an opportunity. And, Logan Stanley's going to have to play better, and he's going to have to play more consistently. And if that happens, he'll probably maintain his spot in the lineup. But those are the sort of things that, get isolated, get identified, and coaches remember. And, when you've got, some pretty significant competition at that position with the organization, going to need to have better games than Logan Stanley did last night. So I'll specifically be looking to see how he bounces back in that next game. What did you think about Big Stan last night? The numbers weren't kind to him, certainly when you looked at it after the game, and everyone was talking about the Johnny O special that was served up on the Coyotes.
The Johnny O special, as if I can't believe 10 years later we're still referencing that whenever someone throws one up the middle. First, what a bad first impression. One thing that stands out to me, I guess, when you look at the defense distribution for ice time on the penalty kill, shorthanded. I think Paul Maurice had gone with a pretty condensed group. DeMello and Stanley was the lead guys, but I mean, yesterday everyone on defense got into the action except for Nate Schmidt, who's he's our offensive defenseman, so I get that. But Stanley led the way, 221. Next, Morrissey, 142. Even Dylan got a minute. Pionk, 136. DeMello, 121. And I have to wonder, they had been pretty condensed with their defense pairings shorthanded. I wonder if we're going to see more of a committee there. So that's something to watch. But I mean, I'm looking through the stat sheet, and Stanley leading the team in giveaways at 3, the one you noted. That's something you're going to want to keep down. And I don't know, does Villy the kid end up getting lineup at some point? We'll have to wait and see. He's obviously not on the trip right now, but I mean, you're going to see the whispers, I think, I realized around these parts for a while.
Ville Heinola is playing before the end of the season, folks. Take that one to the bank. Now, whether he's popping in and bouncing someone out of the lineup that is healthy, we'll see about that. But it's unrealistic to think that this group of 6 is going to be healthy throughout the entire time, especially with COVID and the potential of losing a player or more at the same time. I mean, part of me, and we'll get to this with the Fink and Murat a little later on. I mean, at some point you could see, I mean, because of what we're going through right now, and they are connected, the defensemen are around each other quite a bit, both in meetings and practice and whatnot, that, I mean, you could be out a few of those guys at the same time. And if that's the case, the great thing about what's happening with the Manitoba Moose right now is it's more, I mean, Ville Heinola gets all the headlines because he's the first round pick and everyone's in love with him, justifiably so. I'm very excited to see him play. But the same people aren't talking about Dylan Sandberg, who is a legit prospect for the Winnipeg Jets. And I can't wait to talk about Kovacevic because he's a guy that was a little more off the radar. But if you saw the goal he scored last night and the size that he brings, it's something maybe we'll get to with Murat. And this was sort of along the lines of, big picture down the road topics for the Winnipeg Jets, not this season, but into next season and the season before. And the Winnipeg Jets have essentially their blue line signed for the next 3 years. I mean, the guys that came over have contracts. Neil Pionk signed an extension. Josh Morrissey's got a long-term deal. Dylan DeMelo's got a deal. Like in a year or two, how different will this blue line look? Does that mean it's, players are traded to make room for younger players? I mean, this roster going into this offseason, depending on what happens this year in the next 2 years, maybe the most fascinating point in the 11 years of Jets 2.0. So I'm looking forward to getting to all of that coming up a little bit later on, but we will check in with some of those Moose players with Scott Billeck coming up in just a few minutes. Hey, before we do that, a big shout out to our friends over at F Apparel. January is here. 2022 is here. And I know it's gotten off to a bit of a crummy start, both weather-wise and, restrictions-wise. But I think we can all be hopeful that just down the road, hopefully sooner as opposed to later, we get back to some semblance of normalcy. And that will mean things like dinners and weddings and parties and graduations. And I know you haven't probably used the suit very much in the last couple of years. I know I haven't. But every guy needs at least one suit that looks great and fits. And F Apparel are the guys locally owned that make the best custom suits for men. You'll see many of the Winnipeg Jets wearing them when they show them walking down the hallway at Canada Life Center into the dressing room, and the social media team captures the fit for the day. Custom suits starting at just $400. They've got many more things too for any occasion, really. Dress shirts, winter jackets, peacoats, and more. Casual chinos, golf pants, untucked dress shirts. But when you're thinking about a wedding for the upcoming year or a suit that you can wear to a multitude of weddings that have been put off for the last few years, talk to the gang over at F Apparel. And if you do have a wedding party coming up this year, talk to Andrew and the gang over at F. 15% off when the group buys their suits from F Apparel. F Apparel, that's EPHapparel.com online, or go down and see them at 190 Smith Street. Well, January is here. I know the gyms aren't quite as busy as they might normally be with everyone getting into the New Year's resolution for obvious reasons. But there's a few things that you can do maybe to make some big changes in your life, and Vita Health can help you do that. I know a lot of people taking a dry January. If you're doing that, why don't you think about maybe some of the great non-alcoholic products they've got at Vita Health, including the non-alcoholic beers from Sober Carpenter and Neil Brothers, along with Soul Brew Elixirs, Boreal Botanicals, and Clever Mocktails. And maybe you're thinking about going vegan for the month. A piece in the Free Press today about that, and I know Finn's has got a vegan menu. But if you're thinking about trying it out for the month of January, talk to the people at Vita Health. They will get you set up, and they've got incredible vegan products, including Tofurkey, Field Roast, Gardein, The Very Good Butchers, Light Life, Beyond Meat, and more. Of course, Vita Health is stocked with Winnipeg's best selection of local, organic, and natural groceries, supplements, and beauty products, all at great prices, too. They've got that amazing grab-and-go deli with delicious salads and sandwiches to help you if you are on the go. 7 Winnipeg locations, including the newest store in Linden Ridge, online at myvita.ca. And while we're talking about being healthy and living it right going into 2022, it all starts with H2O. And when we're talking water in Winnipeg, we're talking Culligan Water, experts in the business, family owned and doing it for 65 years here in Manitoba. They've got it all: water softeners, filters, bottled water coolers, whole home systems, and drinking water systems, not to mention citywide water delivery services. And if you need something for your business as you bring people back to work, commercial and industrial water products and solutions of all shapes and sizes. Give Keenan and the gang over at Culligan a call, 694-5180. They're located at 1200 Sargent Avenue, and you can find them online at drinkculligan.com. All right, much more on the Jets. Murat coming up a little later on. Talk about this big game in the league tonight between Toronto and Edmonton. Some other interesting stories in the world of sports later on. But let's talk some Moose right now with, for my money, the top up-and-coming play-by-play guy around the Fink himself, Dan Fink, voice of the Manitoba Moose on 680 CJOB and moosehockey.com, joins us now from the Iceplex. Fink, what's going on?
Bit of a week here, but we're through it and looking forward to getting on the road here with the Moose and to some warmer climates.
Yeah, well, yeah. Why don't you just start off pissing everybody off, saying, "Yeah, just got to get this. I just got to get this one in before we get on the plane and get the hell out of here." Hey, I don't blame you, and we're all envious. Hey, before we talk about the games, we know that this has been a real tough time for everyone in and around the community. What was it like getting back to no fans in the building the last few nights? I mean, it was kind of bizarre because we got to hear the goal horn from the Moose come through on the TSN broadcast last night. I was hoping we hear your call too, to be honest with you. I know how good those are, but probably, I mean, it's something that has to be done right now, but probably somewhat eerie being back in, especially when you think about this time of the year, especially for the Moose historically. And this goes all the way back to my time working with the team freaking 20 years ago. I mean, the New Year's game was always huge. I mean, it's a big, big time for the team. I was looking forward to getting to a few of the games. And fortunately, we had the hockey on the ice, but none of the butts in the seats.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, that New Year's game is such a tradition for folks, for families to come to. And I know we were tracking well with sales, and even the games after that, the ones that we just actually played, had some pretty good numbers as well. So it was looking forward to having everybody out, but this is the world we live in. So this is what we got to do. Hopefully not for very long, because one, it'd be great to see everybody back. And two, if there's folks in the stands, that means our community's health is doing well too. So looking forward to that day. But yeah, it was, it was almost weird how normal it felt to go back to it. And I mean, the Moose, I mean, played most of our games here out behind me, actually, at the Iceplex here. But I mean, for the Jets games and stuff like that, just kind of the eerie quiet leading up, even especially once you get in that hour before a puck drop, when usually you'd smell, Paul Maurice mentioned this a while ago, that the smell of the popcorn in the building and stuff like that, you don't get that. You don't have kind of the thrum of energy before the guys hit the ice for warmups. And then, I mean, Colin Paterson, the game operations crew, do a great job at keeping the atmosphere good in the building, but it's just not the same without the fans there. But the guys put together some entertaining games against the Iowa Wild, got through it, and hopefully by the time we're back, we'll be back to full go.
Well, let's talk about first, let's get to this 2 series. A split. You would have loved to gotten greedy and got the full 4 points. Ended up being 3. Fill us in on this 2-game set with the Iowa Wild, doing it without CJ Cease, without Cole Perfetti, without Christian Vesalainen, and some new goaltenders.
Well, yeah, it was a whirlwind week. Of course, most of the call-ups and things like that were in the bag, but the goaltending situation got a little dicey there when of course Arvid Holm got called up to the taxi squad. Mikhail Burden was dealing with some COVID-19 issues, and Then Philip DeRosier comes up, and all of a sudden he's hurt, so he can't go. So in comes Evan Cormier, guy with 37 games of AHL experience prior to getting the call with the Moose, but they bring him in from Newfoundland, and lo and behold, he comes in, makes 29 saves on 30 shots, and his Moose debut was excellent in both games, really. Gave the Moose a chance to win in both contests. So the guys soldiered on through. They did a great job of filling the gaps. Things got a little bit scrambly. It was times that it feels like maybe like a preseason game. And then you start to look at the rosters and you're like, well, neither team has many of its NHL contracts in, so it's kind of like a preseason game here. So it was definitely interesting in the Iowa Wild. I mean, the Moose were in one. The Iowa Wild were really in one for roster issues. They actually played a man short in that second game. They had Marco Rossi and Matt Boldy called up right before that game, so they were missing a lot of bodies too. So a couple of really gutsy efforts for both teams, and obviously, like you said, the Moose would have really liked to pick up the 2 points in that second game. They outshot the Wild 11-1 in the third period, had some glorious chances to win it in overtime, but once it got to the shootout, you got a guy as depleted as the Wild were, like Kyle Rau, who's scored many goals, 100 to be exact, in the American Hockey League, and he comes through with a big shootout winner for them. So 3 out of 4 points, I think you'll take that on most occasions, but yeah, certainly interesting games, but amazing to watch how some guys just take those opportunities and run with them.
Dan Fink, voice of the Moose, with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. I see you, Mal Priest. It's a great idea. They're on the list. Hey, as far as these 2 games go, for Mark Morrison, anytime, especially at the American Hockey League level, when you have a bunch of call-ups, and it's even, I think, more highlighted right now that without the normal injuries, you also have the COVID list, and now you got the taxi squad. I guess from the coach's perspective, has to be pretty happy with the guys that were around and the way they've been able to, fill the shoes of a number of players that we went down the list earlier that, have been carrying a lot of weight for this hockey club through the early part of the first half of the season.
Yeah, and the nice thing for the Moose is they really did a great job this offseason of filling out that depth. And most of the guys, all the guys with the club right now are signed to contracts, things like that, or call-ups. They haven't had to really go searching for guys other than in the goaltending situation, as we mentioned, with Evan Cormier coming in. So, and that's worked out pretty well. So these are guys, for the most part, familiar with the organization, a lot of returning players. They've been with the team for a while now. So despite how depleted the Moose were, they had a lot of familiar faces in the lineup, and they were able to fill in. I mean, you look at a guy like Cole Meyer, who doesn't get a lot of praise for the job he does, really anchoring the Moose middle six, really the third line center kind of role. He slides up to the first line and does a pretty solid job in a shutdown role, because that's what he does on a usual basis. He's usually out there against the other team's best, trying to keep them under wraps. And then you look at a guy like Nick Jones, who's on his wing, usually on Meyer's wing, that is. He moves into his natural position as a center and does a very solid job. You get those young guys like Todd Burgess, who until last game had 4 points in his last 3 games. So those guys take those opportunities and run with it. I know I've talked about Greg Morellis on this show before. He's the guy that's up to 11 points now with the Moose, who's essentially their fourth line center. He was on the second line last game. So you look at some of these guys and what they've been able to do with the opportunity. That's what the American Hockey League is all about. Maybe slightly secondary to developing those NHL prospects, but it's about guys grabbing those opportunities like your Greg Morellis's, like your Evan Cormier's, and running with those chances and parlaying them into something more, as we've seen with guys like Christian Reichel, who turned an AHL contract into an NHL contract, into scoring his first NHL goal just the other day.
Well, hey, speaking of that goal, I mean, that was one of the coolest moments. And I mean, most of us were watching the Jets get back on the ice after 2 weeks off against the Vegas Golden Knights. The Moose were playing at the same time on Sunday afternoon in a game that should have had a whole whackload of fans, but, unfortunately, they weren't allowed in. But the one moment that I think we saw, and your social media team did a great job of putting out, they did the update on what was happening in Vegas, showed that the Jets had scored, and showed that Christian Reichel had gotten his first as a member of the Winnipeg Jets and a National Hockey Leaguer. And the reaction on the bench of his teammates was really cool. I mean, those are the sort of the moments I think that people will really remember. And I imagine that was pretty exciting for many of those guys that envisioned themselves being in Reichel's shoes at some point, scoring in the National Hockey League with the big club.
Yeah, it was fun to see the initial, wait, what? And then they start, everybody glues in. I think in that shot, you can see Nicholas Jones. He's sitting on the bench looking back towards, I think it was Marty Johnson, and he immediately spins around and looks up at the big screen. There's everybody snapping straight up, and yeah, it's pretty cool, and it gives you an idea of just how tight this group is. And the coaches really for the past couple seasons have talked about just how close this group is, how they play for each other, and the pride they take in playing for each other. And I think it's those little moments that brings it from just being something that, okay, yeah, we hear this all the time, to you see just how close these guys are, how invested they are in each other's success. And for Christian Reichel, a guy that's really well liked around this room, has been a mainstay in this organization now for the past few years and has done a lot of good things. To see him find that success is something that the team's very excited about and still talking about on a day-to-day basis.
No doubt about it. Dan Fink, voice of the Manitoba Moose, with us. Murat joins us from The Athletic a little later on for some more Winnipeg Jets chat. Want to ask you about the blue line, though. Jets have been relatively healthy. They're very deep, maybe organizationally, maybe as deep as they've been in a long, long time. And that's been difficult for some talented young prospects to get time with the big club. First and foremost, everyone wants to know about Ville Heinola. Had a nice setup in the first goal last night. You're watching him game in and game out. Tell us about his season so far and how he's knocking on the door of the big club right now.
I mean, for Ville, it's just the same old, same old. He's just continuing to add to that toolkit along the way, and we all know the offensive presence that he can bring. Though he did go through a bit of a cold spell there, 5 games without a point. That's a lot for him. But back on the score sheet now, I mean, over that span, I think over those 5 games, I think he had something like 20 shots on goal. So he was still getting his chances. But yeah, and it was interesting. You're seeing a little bit more physicality and things like that, and that's really what you want to see from a guy who's a little bit smaller. He was getting into it with Cody McLeod, who folks will know from a long time in the National Hockey League. That's a tough customer. Ended up getting the better of him a couple of times. And those are the situations that he's in the American Hockey League to learn, to go against that big, heavy forward and learn how to deal with them. And he's not going to have a whole ton of weight to put behind himself at any point in his career to deal with guys like that. So he's got to learn the tricks and things like that to deal with those big forwards. So that's the opportunity that he gets on night in, night out basis. And he's rolling with a really good player to kind of show him the ropes in that regard in Jimmy Olney, and to make sure everyone behaves themselves on the ice as well. So the Moose captain making sure that there's a little more room out there for Ville Heinola to apply his trade. So it's not perfect every night. It never will be with that young defense core. Saw a couple of times when the pressure got coming from the Wild, they brought the physicality, especially in the second period, and we saw maybe things clench up a little bit. And this isn't just Heinola, it's up throughout the lineup there for a few shifts. But then they learn, they assess, they get some talks from the coaches and move on with it. So it's all about that learning process for everybody, Heinola included. And it's such valuable time for all of them. And it's been a lot of fun to watch them go. I mean, starting to break down some of the numbers. The Moose defense has 21 goals this season of Manitoba's 82. That's over 25%. So that's tops in the American Hockey League, and they're a lot of fun to watch.
Well, and one of the guys that I want to talk about scored last night. Before we get to him, Dylan Sandberg. He was the one guy had a real tough start to the season, was injured in training camp, got a slow start to the season, just rehabbing with the Winnipeg Jets. He's back now. How's he playing now that he's been back in as a regular for a few weeks?
Yeah, just slots right back in with Johnny Kovacevic where he was last year, and those two are an impressive shutdown pair. There's not a lot happening on the ice in the Moose end when those guys are out there. I mean, it was really impressive to see. I was expecting that he would maybe take a little bit to get going, especially with those lower body injuries. It can really put a damper on your season. You miss that ramp up time through the first 10 games or so, and you're really fighting to catch up. And I mean, we saw that a few seasons ago with Logan Stanley, who dealt with a couple of injuries one season, just never really got back on track until right before the shutdown with COVID-19. So for Sandberg to step in and play like he did, it was maybe a little surprising that he was able to get going as well as he did, but very, very solid. I mean, I don't know if he's going to be a guy that puts up huge offensive numbers. So you're more looking at him to be that guy that can shut things down, but he's got good offensive instincts as well. The play doesn't die with him or anything like that in the offensive zone. So it's really exciting to watch these guys on a game in and game out basis. Everybody brings their own little flair to the lineup, whether it's a Leon Gavanka with that booming shot, Declan Chisholm just wheeling around the offensive zone, finding a little space. Johnny Kovacevic, again, more on the shutdown side, but man, he's found a little bit more of an offensive gear. And so every defenseman just seems to fit in nicely, and it really is an elite decor in the AHL.
Well, you just mentioned Johnny Kovacevic. He scored a 6th last night for the Manitoba Moose. He's a big, big young man. I mean, fill people in on Kovacevic if they haven't seen him so far this year. And I mean, how soon are we going to be talking about, a guy like him being in that mix of challenging for a spot in the National Hockey League?
Well, I'll leave that last question to the people who get paid a lot more money than I make. So you know me, I don't touch that one with the 10-foot pole. That keeps me out of trouble.
Well, listen, okay, maybe I'll rephrase it. I'll rephrase it because it really does seem like he is a young man that, maybe didn't have the fanfare of a Heinola or a Sandberg. But it doesn't take very long to watch the Manitoba Moose to realize that this guy is a heck of a prospect as well, and is doing it in both ends this year for Mark Morrison.
Yeah, I think if in more of a general sense, if there's one thing the Moose have proven over the last few years, it's that at any point that guy can appear, whether it's Jansen Harkins or Christian Reichel or Logan Stanley. Those guys step in and all of a sudden you realize, well, these guys are players and they know what they can do. Now you start to look at the wingers, and up and down an AHL lineup, there are wingers that can slot in the National Hockey League. Fully my belief that a lot of those guys can get in and log you some valuable games, and gets a little tougher up the middle and on defense. But for Johnny Kovacevic, I mean, what he brings to the table is just a really, really good gap play. And when you start to look at the speed of the National Hockey League, your gap has to be elite. When you're dealing with a guy like Connor McDavid burning in on you, you need to be in the right place at the right time. You need to have those reads right. And when you have good reach and a good gap like Johnny Kovacevic does, that's a valuable tool. I mean, when Kovacevic and Sandberg are on the ice, the Moose ability to jam things up at the blue line and just eliminate entries and turn them into dump-ins and to turn them into offside calls, just really, really making it difficult to get into the offensive zone for the opposition. That's what they excel at, and that's what's going to be a tool for Kovacevic when and if he gets that chance at the next level.
All right, Dan Fink is the voice of the Manitoba Moose, joining us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. So far, second place in the division, and certainly have a few more games to make up because of, well, we all know why. I mean, overall, how would you categorize the 2021 portion of the 21-22 season for the Herd?
You know what? For 2021 overall, it was a really, really spectacular year for the Moose. I mean, they went 33-22, 2-2, I believe, is the mark through all of 2021, which is around a .590 win percentage. So going back to the shortened season last year and then to the first half of this season, really, really stellar. I mean, you look at their home record, they're 10-2-1 this season. So it's been really, really good on home ice. Just a little below 500 on the road. So that's the mark they're looking to improve, but can certainly do that if they get off to a good start on this road trip. So it was very solid. I mean, you look at this team, they're just consistent. I mean, even through all the omissions in the lineup they have over the last little bit, you know what you're going to get from the Manitoba Moose period to period and game to game. And maybe one of the most consistent teams I've seen at this level in the last few years, because that's usually what separates the top teams from the middle teams. And then the bottom teams is that consistency that you can find not only within a game, but game to game. And the Moose have certainly had that. So it'll be exciting to see as they start to get a few more bodies back from injury and the COVID list and maybe the taxi squad. We'll see how that all plays out. And hopefully the world calms down a little bit and put some water on those flames a little bit. And the Moose can get back to what they were doing, because they were picking up some big wins over some impressive teams and really cemented themselves in second position. And now we'll see on this road trip if they're really able to lock that in.
Well, speaking of this road trip, hitting the road, tomorrow and a couple games in Texas, and what you got, a 6-gamer, probably a great time, as you mentioned, both weather-wise and what's happening, here to actually get out, play in front of fans, and maybe get some sort of normalcy back out on the road for this hockey club. Fill people in on what's to come, not to mention where people can watch and listen to your calls of these this Moose 6-gamer away from Winnipeg.
Yeah, coming up on Friday and Saturday, they'll be in Texas. First time, I believe, 756 days since the Moose played in Texas. So that goes back to December 13th, 2019. So it has been a while since we've been down to Austin. So looking forward to that. Great city there. Obviously won't be taking in much of it, but maybe a chance to walk outside around the hotel or something like that, enjoy some weather. But a good team down in Texas. They've had their challenges roster wise throughout the season, but seeing a few more guys make their way back. They haven't played since before the break, so it's been a while for them, and the Texas Stars will be looking to get going, and the Moose will have to be ready for that, because they're going to come out fresh and they're going to be chomping at the bit to get going going. So should be a fun couple of games. Always is when it's against the Texas Stars. So those games, 2 7:00 starts on cjob.com/sports and AHL TV. And I believe the league just announced that Friday game, I'm going to actually check my email and make sure that that's the actual game and it's not the Saturday game or something like that. But the free game of the week on AHL TV is indeed this Friday. So you can catch that one for no charge whatsoever. So that is a good opportunity to catch the Moose in action on Friday. And of course, we'll have the call alongside Derek Meach, the former Texas Star himself.
Yeah, nice to see Meach get a little bit of a taste of the Jet broadcast last night. He did a great job, but you've been grooming him very well, Fink. I mean, it was a seamless transition from one great broadcaster to another, if I do say.
Oh, it's just what we do, Huss. We develop people for the next level. So I was laughing with Meacher because I said, "Oh, you're getting called up." I mean, not that you haven't done this before, but guy's been called up a few times in his day to the National Hockey League, but maybe a little bit different working on the broadcast side. But no, it was great to see him get that opportunity, whether it's a player, a staff member, a broadcaster. An NHL debut is always exciting. And you know what? He sounded great last night and couldn't be happier for him. And hey, I saw a lot of comments on my feed that folks want to hear more of Derek Meach. So if you want to hear more of Derek Meach on broadcast, tune into our Moose broadcast because he's there every game.
A 6-gamer coming up. Hey, one final non-hockey question for you just on the way out. Have you ever done play-by-play for football?
I have never done play-by-play for football. I have done hockey and basketball, and that is it. But football, you know what? I enjoy watching football. I don't know the ins and outs well enough. I don't think the formations and all of that. But yeah, it's definitely interesting to see how different sports go.
Well, I'll say this. You're doing an amazing job. I love the broadcast. Keep up the great work. And by the way, if you're a season ticket holder, you may have missed this email at the beginning of the season. But Jets season ticket holders do have that subscription to AHL TV. So, with the Jets playing tomorrow night and then another week off, might be a good time to take advantage of that and see what the Moose have going on this road trip while we don't have much going on right now. Finker, all the best. Hey, by the way, is Burton going on the road? What's the latest on him?
I'll have to reserve comment on that one for now. Find out what's going on.
Right now, it's TBD, to be determined.
Yeah, we'll leave that one to the coach and the GM.
Hey, thanks for doing this, buddy.
Thanks, Huss. Always a pleasure to be on.
Right on. There is Daniel Fink, the voice of the Manitoba Moose here on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. And yeah, as I said, if you haven't taken advantage of it, if you are a season ticket holder, or I don't believe it's very expensive. There's a lot of talent on this Moose team right now. And, with all this off time for the Winnipeg Jets, unfortunately, might be a good time to take advantage of that and check out a few of these games coming up soon. Great stuff from Fink. I'm going to have Murat coming up very quickly on the program, but it's right now. You know what? I mean, I don't need to tell anybody here. Extreme cold warning, absolutely miserable right now. And it's definitely complicating many people's drives to work or wherever they have to go. You better make sure you've got a good battery right now. This is the time of year where you're going to find yourself in a bad situation if you don't. And if you need a battery, especially if you're stranded right now, 783-8787, area code 204. Donnie and the gang at Manitoba Battery have got you covered. First and foremost, 24/7, 365. Manitoba Battery has the best prices on batteries in town. Don't waste your time at Costco or at any of these big box stores. Give a great local company a call and let them give you the best deal on a battery. And as I mentioned, if you are stranded or your car just won't start at home and you need to get that in, give them a call. They'll get it delivered to you, so you can get in there and get back on the road. Of course, snowmobile season's here as well. Hopefully a little less cold outside. But with the snow we've had, trails are open. People are going to be having fun on that. Make sure you got a good battery for your sled. All makes and models serviced by Manitoba Battery, usually about $65 to $75. Find out more on everything they can power for you at manitobabattery.com or pop down and see them over at 1026 Logan Avenue. Well, Royal Sports is finishing up their massive Boxing Week sale and getting into 2022. Always Winnipeg and Manitoba's headquarters as the ultimate sports superstore. Not only $1 million inventory when it comes to hockey equipment, both for skaters and goalies, sticks. We've got it all. Snowboard gear for those of you that are looking to get outside. When it comes to outerwear, they've got it all. I mean, incredible toques, jackets, boots as well. It's some really cool ones from Vans. It's all there. You really have to see it to believe it. One of the great ways to do that, though, is to follow them on Instagram at Royal Sports Pembina. You can see the latest deals and stock coming in at times. And of course, Bomber Grey Cup merchandise continues to come in. Back-to-back champs. You're going to be wanting to sporting some of those. And of course, Jets gear as well. The biggest and best selection in the city. Royal Sports, 750 Pembina Highway. Been with us from day one on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Pop down, say hi to the gang, get what you need, and tell them that your boys at Winnipeg Sports Talk sent you. And with 2022 here, many people thinking about new things for the new year. And if those new things involve potentially a new car, start your search with the experts over at Knott Autocorp. Why not get into the car of your dreams at a great price with the help of the Knott team? They're down at Waverly and McGillivray, where they've also recently opened the new Winnipeg Car Lab. You can follow Winnipeg Car Lab on all the socials, doing wraps, striping, tinting, rims, custom wraps for corporate vehicles as well. That's all there. When it comes down to it, dozens of Teslas on the lot, some amazing SUVs. And if there's a car that you are really looking for, they'll help you search it, find it, and get it for you as well. Knott Autocorp, knott.ca, and over at Waverly and McGillivray. All right, we're going to get to it with Murat Atesh. And I did promise that I would talk about what happened with Hellebuyck and Scott Billeck after the game. I'm not going to put Murat. I'm not going to bring that up with Murat because, of course, you don't want to get it. Other the media brethren in on that. But I mean, it was nothing, to be honest with you. This is something that's happened a million times before, but I will get to it before we get to the end of the program. But we've got a lot to get to. A big win last night, a huge game tomorrow, and looking forward to hearing Murat's thoughts on what we've seen of the Jets now back on the ice under Dave Lowry. So let's get right to it and welcome in for the first time in 2022, the one and only, the always popular Murat Atesh of The Athletic. What's going on, dude? How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. I'm feeling good. I just got home from a workout, so I'm like incrementally in a better mood than I typically am as well. That's a 2022 thing. Welcome to the leaner, more fit, presumably Murat, to debut on your show today.
Did you have any major New Year's resolutions other than to get in some workouts before you jump on with me in the afternoon?
I've never been a guy that like can decide when a resolution happens. So birthdays, New Year's, I've never been able to do that. But every now and again, I get onto a goal. So like sometime in the middle of November, I decided I need to get healthy again. I used to play sports to some degree, and I'm a little rounder and softer. I'm keeping the bottom half off screen right now. You know what I mean? So we're working at it. We're working to get better again.
How soon should we be expecting some gym thirst traps from you on Instagram?
Absolutely never. I don't have the ambition or the physique, but we'll see.
Let's get to last night. What'd you think of the game? I mean, I said this to Remis in the middle of the night last night. I had like a pseudo dream. I don't know whether I was still talking about the game, but Karl Vejmelka was literally in my head last night. And I imagine if the Jets don't win that game, this guy is the boogeyman of Winnipeg. He was incredible last night, and I think prevented it from being a pretty lopsided game. How did you see things last night?
Yeah, fairly similarly. It's amazing to me that Karl Vejmelka could live rent-free in your dreamscape. Like
After a win.
After a Jets win. But that's how good he's been. I mean, was it 47 saves? Was it more than that? I mean, he was up there one more time. He almost stole the game. Winnipeg this time, compared to that 1-0 loss, they got a lot of their chances from that home plate area. They fought for the middle of the ice. And while I think that the Jets did make it a little bit more difficult on themselves than they needed to, I thought Connor Hellebuyck made some good saves too. I mean, Phil Kessel in the first period takes a nice bounce, goes past behind Scheifele and the two defensemen to make that shot on Connor Hellebuyck. That was a great shot. Hellebuyck made the save. Hellebuyck didn't have that easy of a night either, despite the heroics. And then you have the Logan Stanley free pizza that the Coyotes feasted on to make it 2-1 at the very end. It wasn't clean. It wasn't easy, but it was a much better game from Winnipeg. And Vejmelka earned everything he got and all the acclaim and all of the rent-free space that he lives in Winnipeg's minds even today after Winnipeg won.
Yeah, I jokingly, was talking to a few friends in Edmonton last night. I'm like, yeah, you should turn this game on. Ken Holland should be on the horn right now at Arizona to get a guy that can actually stop the puck. Now, I'm not sure whether he's just the Jets boogeyman or he's done this to some other teams. The numbers wouldn't suggest that. But bottom line is he kept that team in that game. It's funny when you compare, and I know we've made a lot of that game 5 weeks ago for obvious reasons. There was 46 shots in that game for the Winnipeg Jets. There was 49 in last night's game. But if you charted out those shots, I think we now know what Dave Lowry's been talking about for the last week or so. So many of them were in and around the crease. It was about as different a 45-plus shot effort as you could have from what happened 5 weeks ago. And I think it speaks to maybe the message from the new head coach being drilled into his players and them following their new leader on the bench.
Yeah, literally drilled. I mean, the drills that Winnipeg has run in practices have been tight quarters. They're running 2-on-2s, 3-on-3s, from the face-off dot towards the goal line as well. I mean, they're looking to establish that battle mentality right from practice and bring it into games. And it seems to be working. I don't want to do that thing that happens when a new coach comes in. I know he lost the first one, but he's won 3 straight, and we act like everything is better. Winnipeg was hanging in for dear life to beat the Arizona Coyotes at the end of last night's game, but the process is genuinely better. So you have to recognize and give credit to that as well. One of the things that I like about that Svechnikov goal sort of shines a light on both your first questions. The first being that despite how amazing the Josh Morrissey pass was, the no-look, everybody's frozen, Vejmelka nearly got it. Like, that was not a goalie beat all of the way. He had a fighting chance at Svechnikov's shot. The only reason Svechnikov scored is because he's a beauty shooter. I mean, he can really fire it. So that's one thing. The other is that the setup to that goal, admittedly not in front of the net, admittedly there's a seam pass, but it comes off a battle won on the wall. And there's a 2-on-2 battle between 2 Coyotes and 2 Jets along the blue line at the boards. Christian Vesalainen hops in to make it a 3-on-2 just at the end. Bumps back to the Jets defenseman, goes to Morrissey. And there's grit involved even in that highlight reel goal that opens up the space, gives Winnipeg an opportunity. And, we're just building into a storyline now, but that's what Dave Lowry is asking for, and that's what Dave Lowry is getting thus far. You hope for more of it. You hope that they can beat teams more than 2-1 plus an empty netter in Arizona's shoes. But you got to like where things seem to be going just at the moment.
Well, absolutely. And you mentioned Evgeny Svechnikov. And I mean, maybe this is recency bias. I mean, it's hard to go down all the games, but I was so impressed with him last night. And it was far more than just the goal. I mean, that was as, I think, effective as we've seen a fourth line play for the Winnipeg Jets in a long time. And I mean, that might have been his best game as a Jet. And I mean, I know people were loving what was happening when he was playing along with Dubois and Connor. I mean, I really did think a huge part of that was just how dominant Dubois and Connor were playing right now, and I thought that he was the beneficiary of it. Last night, he did that with Dominic Toninato and Christian Vesalainen, who had been, struggling and in and out of the lineup, up and down the lineup. I'll tell you what, if Evgeny Svechnikov plays like that night in and night out, he's gonna basically make it impossible not to play more and move up. I mean, what did you think about his game in both ends last night, not to mention the fact that they spent most of their time in the Coyotes' end as the fourth line?
Yeah, I think that I see eye to eye with you on this, Huss. Svechnikov, yeah, maybe carried a little bit by Dubois and Connor. When he came off of that line and Blake Wheeler went onto it and it seemed to be just a horrible thing. You saw all the hot takes on social media. I respect Svechnikov had played well, but those two guys are so good they can carry guys. Similar to what Andrew Kopp and Adam Lowry do. I mean, Christian Reichel can come in, play a smart, responsible game and have some success with those guys, just like Brandon Tanev did, just like Yoel Armia. It goes on like this. So we've seen this happen before where a relative passenger, even if he can do a lot of good things, has success when playing with great players. Like you point out, that fourth line isn't stacked with guys that are world beaters. It reflects Winnipeg's depth that Christian Vesalainen is on the fourth line, that Dominic Toninato can be functional in that space, even with injuries to Gustafsson, to Wheeler, even with Cole Perfetti not in the lineup. But for Svechnikov to drive from a position like that does reflect that this is a bit of a found money for Winnipeg, a little diamond in the rough that they seem to be reclaiming. His enthusiasm is infectious. His shot is there. And when he's doing all the other little things that sort of help with puck possession or give that fourth line a little bit of energy, I mean, he's probably too good for the fourth line, but if there's balance on the lines, then great. Take it as a bonus and run.
Yeah, and I think it'll be very interesting to see if and when this team ever gets fully healthy. It's even more of a big if in a year where COVID-19 is running around, you guys being in and out of the lineup and rosters around. More performances like that, I'm sure, will have Dave Lowry thinking about maybe putting him back in that spot where he was. And there's no slight on Jansen Harkins. I thought he's been good at times, certainly had a real strong game against Vegas and made the most of his opportunity. But it's a good thing for this team to be in when, you've got Blake Wheeler coming back, who at some point they hope will be, the last time we saw Blake Wheeler was as good as we've seen him in a long time in that Vancouver game, but that's been a while. It'll take him to get back in. But Harkins has shown that he's worthy of a spot in the lineup, can play up and down. Christian Reichel, I wasn't as impressed in yesterday's game with him as I was in the Vegas game. And I think that, is logical. You're kind of all fired up for that first game. You get your first goal. It's a little tough. So I'm not sure whether he's as much in the mix, in the weeks to come. But I certainly think Svechnikov is. And then Tony Nato and Vesalainen, playing the way they did with Svechnikov. At some point, you just stumble on a unit that works well together. And you don't want to break them up. I know that's ironic that we're talking about this considering what happened with the second line earlier this year. But I really do think that there's a number of players right now looking at the opportunity with sort of a fresh start under a new coach that are, through their play and through their practice as well, letting Dave Lowry know that, maybe there's a few more options to be considered that were under the previous head coach.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that Jansen Harkins getting that opportunity is a reflection of the new coach. I think that there is a speed and an aggression to Harkins' game. Even when he's not having his most effective night, the guy has wheels and he gets himself noticed for those reasons. He's a big guy and he can get in on the forecheck as well. I think that is an opportunity that has been marked by this coaching transition. The other thing that I guess I would think with the new beginning is it's going to be incumbent on us as observers not to overreact when guys score. Jansen Harkins' goal was great. I love that move into the middle. I love that that simple, assertive net drive into that slot and then the shot that he took. That's what you would like to see from him. You don't want him doing too much or trying too hard to get noticed to maintain that job on that second line. Same with Christian Reichel's goal. He said he closed his eyes, and you know what? I believe him. I believe that offense isn't going to be his calling card at the National Hockey League level, and I believe that he has enough of an AHL track record at this point where the fact that he came in and scored is not a surefire sign that this guy is going to be a middle six contributing NHLer when everybody's healthy. So if there's a little bit of room to play around, if there's room to perhaps play Cole Perfetti as soon as Winnipeg's next game in a spot like that, or to your point, Blake Wheeler, when he comes back, and that's inevitable. We know he makes the salary that he does. We know he's the captain of the team. But can you imagine a better fit for Kopp and Lowry playing some of the toughest minutes than Blake Wheeler?
No. The answer to that is no.
He's such a strong defensive winger, and injury issues and missed assignments during those injury issues aside, for one stretch last year, he's consistently had a positive defensive impact. Analytics-wise, by the eye, he's a hard-nosed player. That's a great shutdown line. If he earns it, give it to him, give him more, because that level he hit was great. But that Kopp-Lowry-Wheeler line has got to be a shutdown line better than anything else Winnipeg could put together.
I would be surprised if that's not the way things look whenever Wheeler comes back and plays his first game with the Winnipeg Jets. I'll call it right now. I expect him to be on that wing. Now, that could be temporary. It could be a chance of, seeing what happens. There's so many variables. Who else is healthy? What's going on with the other lines? All of that. But Dave Lowry is already playing that line in a very, very different, even when Scheifele and Wheeler were with Lowry earlier this year, it was obviously sort of a temporary thing. They worked him in a few different situations. Right now, Dave Lowry is throwing out Adam Lowry, Andrew Kopp, and in this case, Christian Reichel, who sort of just emerged from the Moose for a few games, in some very high leverage situations against top opposition. If that is going to continue, I think he starts with Wheeler there. And we can talk all about, who's first line, second line, third line. Wheeler with his passing and his pedigree, certainly will always, I think, be part of the power play. To me, you might be talking about a line. And then we'll see if you can continue get what we've been getting from the fourth line, those sort of solid, good 7 minutes that can maybe turn into 9 or 10 in games that don't have a lot of penalties. I mean, that to me is the best case scenario for the Winnipeg Jets right now. But I think they start with Wheeler in that spot. And if it goes well, I could absolutely see that continuing through to the end of the season.
Yeah, I have time for that completely. I do. And I think that it covers a lot of bases in terms of his role. I also think that in the top six, to sort of just feed into why that makes sense to me, you know, Paul Stastny does so many things that make Scheifele and Ehlers hum right now. I mean, the defensive responsibility, the fact that he's got the middle of the ice taken care of, the fact that, you know, his reads are always right. He seems to know where Scheifele and Ehlers are at all times, and that's offensively and defensively in terms of rolling into covering off those needs, because, I mean, Scheifele and Ehlers are more dangerous at the other end of the ice. I think that really helps in the same way that having two natural centers like Andrew Kopp and Adam Lowry is why that works so well. There's a defensive standard that those guys hold because they know their defensive responsibilities. They've been switching off of each other forever now. I mean, that's an established thing with the Winnipeg Jets, but there's a level of defensive excellence that you can get to when you have these centers playing these centers on the wing playing defense with the awareness of a centerman. All of a sudden that adds so much and it lets guys go the other way. I think Pierre-Luc Dubois is your best independent 200-foot player right now. And I don't know that he needs the Kopp or the Stastny to cover him off. I mean, put him together with Kyle Connor and just go. So I think that there's a lot of things in those pairings. Stastny on that top line, I like quite a lot. And then Connor and Dubois, let them go. They'll make it work with anybody, Kopp and Lowry. And the thing that leads me to, though, and this is what I'm working towards, is a slight tangent, is if these centers playing great defense from the wing makes those lines hum, gives them success about anybody, or against anybody, pardon me, then the standard for what wingers do defensively should go up to match that. And I think that if you get that from Blake Wheeler on that third line when he comes back, if you get just a little more, because this won't be their bread and butter, but a little more of that from Kyle Connor, from Nick Ehlers, from Mark Scheifele, this team has so much depth that it can hum. Like, very goodness and a playoff run is accessible to these guys based on what we're seeing.
Yeah, and you know, and let's just kind of take this to the blue line. Speaking of being, you know, having the depth. I mean, we just had Dan Fink on, and I mean, you know, we always start talking about Ville Heinola, but I mean, Dylan Sandberg's really sort of fit in after those injuries at the start of the year. And I'd be stunned if we didn't see Johnny Kovacevic play some games at some point, maybe not necessarily this season, but in the future. You know, you got Leon Gavanka and Declan Chisholm there. I mean, at this point, organizationally, from top to bottom, I mean, it's so night and day as to where we were, you know, a couple of years ago in the aftermath of Dustin Byfuglien leaving and, you know, kind of a piecemeal makeup to the defense core in the big club, never mind what was happening to the Manitoba Moose. But interesting moves by Lowry, swapping Nate Schmidt and Dylan DeMello and then going back. What did you think over the last couple of games of the different looks of the blue line with those pairing swaps with basically everyone with the exception of Dylan and Pionk?
Yeah, I'm not sure that my read on this is right, but my first impression was that Morrissey and Schmidt, despite having pretty solid shot-based numbers in terms of, you know, shot attempts, expected goals, they've actually been a solid top pair by those types of metrics throughout the season. They've been burnt by a couple of goals here and there. Just in terms of straight up goals for, goals against, it hasn't always reflected the flow of play. And so this might be a response. My impression was that this might be a response to the results, to the goals, as opposed to the process, which has by and large been pretty good. There may be a sense that that he doesn't believe that Schmidt is a shutdown, tough minutes defender, and moving him to that third pairing. DeMello, who has had, you know, real great goals-based success against the McDavid-Draisaitl combination last summer. I mean, there's this sense that maybe that becomes a more of a shutdown duo. And then the other thing that I looked for in that was the zone starts. Where are these guys starting their shifts? Because I think Josh Morrissey and Nate Schmidt can be really effective, especially effective if they're getting onto the ice a little bit more in that offensive zone, because they each have a bit of puck skill. You saw it on Morrissey's assist to Evgeny Svechnikov. You've seen Nate Schmidt and the way that he looks off passes so often. So I wondered about that. But at the same time, he switches right back to that duo, depending on what the game state is. So I think we're learning a little bit more, and it might be that Winnipeg got out to that lead. He didn't feel like he needed a really heavy shutdown situation. It might be that DeMello's made a couple of mistakes, and he's got a great track record defensively, but I mean, he got burned by Lawson Krause. He got burned on that goal against Vegas the other day where he sort of stumbles and Janmark goes in. So it may be an experiment that in the short term didn't work or isn't working. I'm still figuring out what I think about that. These are my first impressions.
As far as Logan Stanley goes, he had a tough game last night at times, and it gets magnified exponentially when you serve one up like he did last night. I couldn't help but think afterwards. I mean, I know Logan Stanley brings a lot to the lineup, but Dave Lowry's looking at that going, I know there's one guy that's not making that pass and turning the puck over that way, and he happens to be playing for the Moose right now. What do you make of Stanley and his play over the course of this season so far? You know, again, with a couple different pairings, playing that sixth role, doing some penalty killing. But still, I mean, even against a team like Arizona, having a game that left a little bit to be desired, certainly when you looked at the numbers at the end of the game.
Yeah, I don't think Stanley has had a particularly strong second season. I didn't have him set up in my mind to have a brilliant second season. I mean, he showed up, played some of the most sheltered third pairing minutes that a Winnipeg Jets defenseman has gotten in the last several years last season. I mean, Winnipeg was very particular about the minutes he got, who he played against, the context of those minutes. And he did so well. He had a great season. It was really great treatment of a rookie defenseman. Great coaching if you're looking to bring in a guy slowly. The last pairing, do you remember Ben Sherratt and Tucker Poolman from the 2017-18 season when Morrissey, Trouba, and Enstrom Bufflin were the top four? You have various injuries. You had Myers and Kulikov as well. But nobody has been sheltered as much as Stanley was last season since that Sherratt-Poolman pairing. All of this to say, he enters this season as a guy with a lot of promise. He obviously has the size. And you're looking, okay, he had such a great season last year. Why isn't he stepping into that top four and excelling? Well, I don't know that that's there for him yet. And I think it's a little bit unreasonable to assume that it should be there for him at this stage. And then maybe getting a more accurate sense of what the player can do. For all of his size, he doesn't always win those net front battles. You know, he's big, he's strong, he can push guys around, but he doesn't always tie up the stick. There's still some defensive issues in his game before you get to the puck. His skills in the offensive zone, his willingness to get that puck to the net, well, it's gone from just an instant shot from the blue line to now he's jumping in a little bit closer to the net. He's finding a little bit, it seems like he has a little bit to give offensively. And I think based on his size and his strength, we assume he's going to be nothing but shutdown and he'll be brilliant at the shutdown side of the game. I don't think that we've seen that. I think he's still learning on that regard. He doesn't make so many puck mistakes for a third pairing defenseman that you'd really think, oh, well, you got to get him out of the lineup. But he's made more of them this season than you'd like. And that one last night was bad. And you've got Ville Heinola coming up who can make that play and will make that play and probably has a higher ceiling despite the difference in skill sets and strength. I'm ready to see Ville Heinola come into the lineup. And I think that Stanley would be the guy to come out.
Yeah. And again, and the one thing that we've seen with this organization is it usually happens. And I mean, we just need to go back over 10 years and I'll throw Kyle Connor out there. I'll throw Josh Morrissey out there. The plan is to let these guys over ripen, if you will, and be ready to walk in and be 100% ready. But usually those guys came in because of injuries or a particular situation and simply played too well to come out of the lineup. And I'm sure that's the hope for a lot of people with Billy. At a certain point, though, this season, he's getting in this lineup. I mean, it's unrealistic to think that with COVID and injuries that we won't see them. And I mean, I'll even kind of go back to our conversation about Sandberg and Kovacevic. I mean, a lot of people are talking about how these guys are never going to get a chance to play because there's 3 years left on these guys' deals. A lot can change in off season, but even short term, I mean, I remember working with Craig Heisinger back in the day, and he said, hey, you want to win a championship? You need at least 10 solid defensemen to do that. They're not looking just to, get into the playoffs and be one and done and out. And we know the meat grinder that the Stanley Cup playoffs is, the attrition that happens through the Stanley Cup playoffs. I think all of those players, starting with Ville Heinola, probably in the regular season, could very well be in the mix, at least to be up with the club, if not in the lineup, depending on what happens, both with injuries And of course, the virus, which seems to be everywhere right now and hitting every team, regardless of sport.
Yeah, it brings this philosophical question to me, because I agree with you, and I guess Craig Heisinger, and fully, that you need way more than 6 defensemen. Something will happen sometime in a regular season, even without COVID being a factor, and we know that it certainly has been. So these guys are going to get their shots. They're going to be important. We've seen it in previous Jets playoff runs where Joe Morrow is scoring important goals, for example. Right? It's not always the Stars, because depth gets challenged. And my question then becomes, what's the best way to prepare them for that moment? And I wonder if there's room, for a lot of reasons, but with the playoffs in mind, to integrate guys like a Ville Heinola right now during this stretch of the season, get him NHL competition and experience for a handful of games, and then prepare him for what could be an important role later. Or if the play is to have him continue to play those enormous minutes for the Manitoba Moose. And I don't feel like I have an absolute certain answer. Like, I think I would like to see Winnipeg rotate these guys in over the course of the season. But being outside of the playoff picture as they are, 1 point outside the wild card spot, they might not feel like they have the luxury like they perhaps did a year ago at this time, and Heinola wasn't playing. They had points in the bank. So I haven't figured out in my mind what I believe the best strategy is. But I do think more NHL games is a good one for Heinola, particularly because he's the next man up. I think Kovacevic will get his opportunity in time. Sandberg in time as well. I'm less concerned about the urgency there. But I agree with you, I guess, all to say that Winnipeg needs more than 6 guys, and Beaulieu is good. The issue with the contract is a good problem to have, but it is a problem at the end of the day. It will need to get solved one way or the other.
Yeah, hey, they're all assets, and you can't play 10 guys at once, and that'll be that's a problem for somebody far above our pay grade right now, and that, of course, is General Manager Kevin Cheveldayoff. Murat of The Athletic with us on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Hey, before we go, let's get to this game tomorrow night. This was a very interesting road trip going in. Sort of bookended by 2 top teams. You had the game that you had to get the win last night, which they did. 2-0 right now on the road trip. But now they're going again. I think still, despite what you see in the standings, they played the least amount of games. The Colorado Avalanche is the measuring stick. We've had a joke about all the litmus test games. I would say that this would definitely be one of them. But what do you make of this matchup at the challenge for the Jets to go up against the Avs for the first time in Denver tomorrow night?
Well, it's going to be an enormous challenge. That's for darn sure. That's for dang darn sure, Huss. Colorado was a good team with Nathan MacKinnon out. And I know that they weren't winning all of their games, but man, there were a lot of good things happening in Colorado. You bring Nathan MacKinnon back and have those lines reassembled and have them going off. You have Cale Makar score what, other than the McDavid 1 versus 4, should be the goal of the year.
Unbelievable.
I have watched that play so many times. The way he lulls the defender into one rhythm and just completely flats. I cannot believe that speed change. I just cannot. Anyway, so I guess I'm just distracted thinking about that Cale Makar goal. It's going to be a challenge. Colorado is the better team. It's the deeper team on paper. It has more success on the season. There's so much that goes into that. Winnipeg has nothing left to do, though, other than empty the tank. It will have days and days between its next game. It's coming off with a little bit of momentum here, getting 2 much-needed wins. They've won 3 in a row. I don't know that I'm going to necessarily say I would expect Winnipeg to win that game. I don't, but I feel like they have nothing to lose in that sense, that they've got a little bit of momentum going. They know Colorado is a great team, and they probably still believe that based on some early success, based on what they have on paper, the Winnipeg Jets should feel like a playoff team. Like, being just blown out of that building would be a completely unacceptable result. So it's absolutely enormous. I had thought at one point we might see Cole Perfetti get into a game like that, but does Dave Lowry double down on the lines that have been winning? We'll see on that front. That's going to be tough. That's really all I got for you. It could be a high scoring game.
Well, I'll say this, you're not leaving anything in the tank tomorrow in that game on the road in the division against a team that you're going to need to match up with and beat if you want to do something significant this year in the playoffs. And they got a week off after the game as well, Murat. So leave it all out on the ice tomorrow night.
Yeah, earn this, right? They're getting rest. I feel like, I don't know why, I don't know if this even works, but Saving Private Ryan, right? The main character's like, earn this. I feel like there's a big break coming coming their way. And I mean, they'll sleep a lot easier day after game day if they're able to leave it all out on the ice against the Avalanche.
Hey, just quickly, if you can, before we go, let people know what you've got coming up this week, and maybe talk about your most recent one. Just a piece on the Jets, the potential, the path they're on, and obviously starting somewhat of a new path with a new guy that's calling the shots behind the bench.
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak to that first. I think we're all looking for, signs of what direction this team is going in. They struggled. They didn't win. They gave up leads. They had issues, and Paul Maurice resigned. And we are looking for a sense of, okay, what can Dave Lowry do? What will the trends be? Should we overreact to this aspect? The fact that they've won, or, is Christian Reichel suddenly going to score every other game he plays for the rest of his career? Like there are certain signposts that you really, really look towards. And I think that, for that most recent piece, I really try to boil it down to the most simple things that are being focused on in practice. I share some insights there and get into how I believe those will impact the games, not just the ones that have happened, but going forward. The other thing, though, to zoom out and take a bigger picture, I mean, do you remember 2017-18? I know we always bring this up. I bring this up like too often. It was Winnipeg's best season. But then you start to ask yourself, why? Why was it so good? And yeah, you have peak Blake Wheeler, sir. You have maybe Winnipeg was not taken as seriously by other teams. You have Dustin Byfuglien. But one of the reasons you can really point to is that was the single most cap efficient team that Winnipeg has ever had. That was Nick Ehlers on his entry-level deal. Patrick Laine, Kyle Connor, entry-level deals. Blake Wheeler making 5.6. Connor Hellebuyck making 2.2 million. Josh Morrissey making, I think, close to $1 million. Andrew Copp, Adam Lowry. It continues down the line. That was a freakishly cap-efficient team that lets a team with a healthy Brian Little add a Paul Stastny for the depth adding in, even with some salary retained. There are some reasons beyond those players being good that team was special. And I think that the current Jets could learn a little bit from that. We have just a couple seasons left in the Hellebuyck, Scheifele, Wheeler window of sorts. And what's going to help this team win is going to be a little bit of cap efficiency. So where is that going to come from? Well, we talk about ELCs, we talk about Cole Perfetti and the future. And so, I mean, I gave you a long answer like that. So we're really thinking about how the current moment fits into the overall trend for these Jets, not only now, but into the future as well.
Hey, just one quick one on Cole Perfetti on the way out. And, we'll see what happens. They've got a game tomorrow, another week of practice, whether he goes back with the Manitoba Moose and hits the road with the club and gets some games in. We will see. It's certainly not up to us to make that decision. But the other option that was floated out last night with your colleague Scott Wheeler with a list of number of players that are being under consideration for this Olympic team without NHL participation is Cole Perfetti. Where are you on that? I mean, what's the best thing for Cole Perfetti? I mean, the organization's going to try and win games, and they'll play the guys that they think give them the best chance to win each and every night. Some people will think it's great. Some people disagree. But from a Perfetti development standpoint, the guy's played literally everywhere over the last couple seasons. Does it make sense to go to China and participate in the Olympics in a very different tournament than we were expecting?
I mean, in one hand, it just feels like completing the collection in a way.
Yeah.
But honestly, for me, if we're just thinking what's best for Cole Perfetti, I'm sure he would love to play in that tournament. I'm sure the idea of representing Team Canada at the Olympic Games would be a bit too good to pass up if offered the opportunity. I don't think that's the best play. I personally think, and I'm still thinking my way through this, but I personally think the best thing that could happen to Cole Perfetti right now is that litmus test of NHL action. I mean, they brought him to the taxi squad after the World Juniors for a reason. They wanted to capitalize on the momentum, give him something positive coming out of a difficult tournament cancellation, recognize the fact that he's played great in the AHL this season, that he's probably ahead of players like CJ Cease and Christian Reichel on the depth chart. This is a player that should be looked up for a little bit of NHL game action. Now they're in a situation where he's still on the taxi squad and not necessarily playing. And maybe you can point to Reichel's goal. Maybe you can point to other sorts of considerations. If you're looking to me as to what's best for Perfetti's development, it's less taxi squad, more game action. And it's about time to figure out at this stage of his career what he's capable of at the NHL level, even if that's just a few games, even if it's 4 or 5 games until Blake Wheeler returns to health and Perfetti hasn't scored so much or done so well that his roster spot is cemented forever. I think that that's the next challenge, because he's solving problems at the AHL level. He's solving problems at the junior level, to be sure. I think the next challenge is the NHL, and the Olympics will not be that same quality of hockey as much as they could be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
No doubt about it. Murat, go get that protein shake in, or what do you ever need to do after the after the big workout. Thanks for doing this. Great to have you back on the program. Enjoy the game tomorrow night, and next week we'll get together, talk about the one game on Thursday against Detroit, Ottawa on Saturday, and then the following week a legitimate long road trip against some top NHL opposition from out east. And who knows, maybe even we'll have a schedule as to where they're going to make up all these games in February by them as well. Have a great one, pal. Thanks for doing this as always.
Hey, thank you, Huss.
There he is, Murat Atesh at WPG Murat, and check out his work in the pages of The Athletic. All right, lots still to come on the program. Do want to give a big cheers to our friends over at Little Brown Jug. Celebrated their 5th anniversary last month and now into 2022 with the 5-year anniversary special brew still available, the Brute IPA, at fine beer stores throughout the city, as well as the tap room down on William Avenue. If you get the chance to hit the tap room, unbelievable spot to meet a friend for a drink, as well as pick up all your favorite Little Brown Jug brews. You can get the winter variety pack with 4 different popular Little Brown Jug beers, and of course the iconic first ever brand, the 1919, which you can also grab at great restaurants, bars throughout the city, and of course at your local Manitoba Liquor Mart or your favorite beer store. But if you don't want to leave the house right now, a little too cold, hit them up at littlebrownjug.ca. You can fill that cart and they'll get it delivered to you citywide all over at littlebrownjug.ca. Cheers to Little Brown Jug, and thanks to them for their support. Still waiting to hear on what's going to happen for Canada when it comes to who will be representing our country when the mixed doubles event. Of course, we were supposed to have the event beginning on the 28th of December in Portage-la Prairie. That got canceled when a number of the athletes tested positive for COVID-19. But Curling Canada's got a very, very big decision. We'll discuss that on future Princess Auto Curling reports here. Would love to see Manitoba's Colton Lott and Katrinas Hellebuyck get the opportunity to go. And I would imagine they'd be in the mix because of how much they played and the success that they've had over the last few years. But we will get to that over the course of the next couple of weeks on Princess Auto Curling Reports. Of course, Princess Auto is where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new in 2022 is at Princess Auto. Of course, a massive national company, headquartered and family-owned right here in Winnipeg, 2 local locations. But you can get those wheels turning between the ears right now, 24/7, 365, and shop online at princessauto.com. And with the chilly weather outside and the restrictions right now, it might be tough to get into a Boston Pizza tomorrow night at 8 p.m. for the game, with everything shutting down at 10 p.m. with an 8 p.m. start. But that doesn't mean you can't get the great taste of Boston Pizza delivered hot and fresh to your door. Give your local BP a call for delivery, pop by for pickup, or as always, you can order online at bostonpizza.com. All right, great hockey talk with the Fink as well as Murat Atesh. Let's get Michael Remis back in here as we continue on the program. Shout out to Double X Rev. Thanks very much for the super chat. Yes, exactly. This is going to be like the 2018 Canada Olympic team. Reem, I am quite interested to see how things shake out with the Olympic team. We kind of went over that list a little bit off air. Maybe we'll do that a little bit later on today that Scott Wheeler popped out. Interesting to hear Cole Perfetti in consideration, and Moose captain as well, Jimmy Ligney, also in the mix for potential some Olympic participation. Bottom line, this is going to be somewhat deja vu. I'm hoping for NHLers, not getting them, but whoever wears those Canadian jerseys will be fired up to try to win what would be a dream of most people, and that's an Olympic gold medal.
Yeah, I'm really curious who's going to shake out on the team. Scott Wheeler tweeted out the list of players that Hockey Canada would be interested. Darren Dreger on this as well, and a lot of people asking about Cole Perfetti and other players who have NHL contracts like Peyton Krebs, Jack Quinn. I guess Mason McTavish has spent some time in the NHL as well. But so they were added to the list by, this is what Scott Wheeler wrote in The Athletic. They were added to the list by Hockey Canada last week. but they're prohibited because they have NHL contracts. They're prohibited from participating at this time. Sorry, that was Scott writing about Dreger's report. So I guess because they have NHL contracts, they aren't eligible, but seemingly, the Jets could release them if they were asked. I'm sure. Would they? I have no idea. Is that the best for Cole Perfetti? Is it the best for the Jets if they're if they need to use him? I guess it depends on how concerned they are about using up that first year of his entry level contract.
I don't think they care about that at all. I mean, if they really cared about that, he wouldn't have been playing a bunch of games at the beginning of the season, because I think they know full well at some point there's going to be a need, and if it's injury or whatnot, he's going to get in there and could easily get to that number. So if they were really concerned about that, he's probably not starting on the roster, and they're saving those games later on if indeed that happens. And I think we'll probably see Perfetti play a number of games at some point before the end of the season. I have to admit, I think I sort of side with Murat on this one. I do think that the best thing for Perfetti, and really the best thing for the team, is probably to have him with the Winnipeg Jets and playing some minutes and games right now in the National Hockey League. Now, listen, I know, it was 2 games against, some of the weakest competition in the tournament. Listen, you're not immediately NHL ready just because you scored 3 points against Austria. But man, he had a great year last year in the American Hockey League, excelled at the Worlds. And, I've seen, I think a lot of the people with these takes haven't really watched Perfetti at all this year play for the Manitoba Moose. Had a nice start, cooled off for a little bit, came back just to under a point a game right now in Manitoba. Playing more games with the American Hockey League is certainly not going to hurt him at all. But I think when you look at this team and where it is right now, there certainly is an argument to be made that in the near future, whether that's tomorrow night, whether that's later on this month, whether that's into February, he'll be knocking on the door and presumably get some sort of a chance. And, much like I kind of cited with Kyle Connor coming up from the Moose and never looking back, Josh Morrissey having that opportunity, I really do think that when it happens for Cole Perfetti, that might be the last time. Might be a one-way trip from the Iceplex down to Canada Life Center for the young first rounder. All right, Remo. So we got to get to this one bit from last night. I know a lot of people sort of wanted to talk about it. A lot of people were talking about it after the game. Sort of an interesting, it wasn't even a back and forth. It was a question from Scott Billeck of the Winnipeg Sun to Connor Hellebuyck about something that happened in the game. And Connor said, "Hey, Scott, I don't have an answer for you. Didn't like the way you, I believe, mentioned my infant son."
If you want to hear it, I have it ready to go.
You have it? Okay, perfect. Okay, so this was what, if you're hearing people talking about it, this was the question, and more importantly, the answer. I'm not even sure if you can hear the question, but this was what Connor Hellebuyck had to say once he got a question from Billeck last night.
I think that's great. He's done twice now. I think he's faced almost 100 shots. What have you seen from him? I mean, he seems to be pretty solid across.
I'm sorry, Scott. I don't have any answers for you. Last time you wrote about my infant son and the decisions I make for him, so I don't appreciate that.
All right. So there was what? It was, as far as these things go, when professional athletes are bent about something that's been written about them before, that was about as cordial, polite, and professional as you'll get. So I certainly didn't have any problem with that. And I think a lot of people, when you hear something like that, it sort of stands out. I mean, usually a lot of these post-game, sessions are somewhat boring. They're talking about the minutia of what the game was going forward. And so when people were listening to that, they were last night, it sort of caught them a little bit off guard. But let's go back to what this was all about. And before I say everything, I love Scott. I mean, Scott, I consider him a friend. I think he's done an amazing job covering both the Winnipeg Jets and COVID over the past few years. But this, of course, comes back to the, when he was asking Hellebuyck about the protocols. And this was right at the time where a lot of people in the National Hockey League were saying, like, they're looking at what's happening in the NFL and other spots. And it was far more restrictive for hockey players. And a lot of people were feeling like, it was, I'll use the word that Connor Hellebuyck said, overkill. Now, I made a point of saying this on the program when it was sort of, and Scott, and maybe this is part of it, I'm not going to tell anyone how to do their job. But I mean, he took it and quoted it and saying, it was overkill. And then that, of course, within the echo chamber that is Twitter, took on, a whole new life of its own. It was sort of making it out that, Hellebuyck was, against everything that's happening. And I mean, again, this question was about the protocols that the players are going through night in and night out. And then, Scott wrote what he wrote. And usually what happens in these situations when people write articles about that in normal times, you write it, you show up the next day, you show your face in the dressing room, you take the heat or whatever it is, you talk to the person, you hear them out if you want, and you kind of move on. It's obvious that that hasn't happened right now because of the situation that we've been in. And I don't have on my, on the top of my head how many times Hellebuyck spoke over the last little while. But presumably that was the first time that Billeck could ask a question since then. It's 100% in Hellebuyck's right to do what he did last night. And to be honest, I think he did it in about as cordial and a professional way as you'll see. As far as the article went, much like everything this year, I mean, some people on one side thought it was great. A lot of people on the others thought that it was, not right. I mean, listen, I love Scott. I didn't like the article. I mean, I didn't know why they were going there. I mean, like, honestly, there's a lot of people, that'll say like, who cares what, these guys are thinking about, the bigger picture of what's going on. It's the same thing. Like, we're not asking Dr. Joss Reimer or Dr. Rusin about the Jet power play. You know what I'm saying? But I think that it was, I think Hellebuyck, what he was saying was a far more nuanced answer that got put out, certainly in the 140 characters. And then, when you read the article, it was almost more a COVID story than it was a hockey story. And he sort of got bought into it. I don't blame him for not being pleased with it. And I got to give Scott credit for going back. I'm sure he expected that to happen last night. To at some point there be a little bit of a pushback. I mean, I think back, like, Remis, let me ask you, is Billeck Hellebuyck the new Freezer Wheeler in Winnipeg? Because this happens a lot more in a lot of other markets that are way, way tougher on their team. But every now and then something like this happens. It's just part of the job. It's just part of the business. I respect both of those guys for going the way it was. And to me, it caught everyone's attention. But to be honest, it was much ado, almost about nothing. He didn't like the article. A lot of people didn't. I'll be honest. I didn't very much myself. But it doesn't make me think anything less of Scott. He's always welcome on the program. And I thought Hellebuyck, stood his ground, said what he had to do in a respectful way. And that was that. Yeah,
I kind of agree. I would hope there's nothing lingering long term from this. But I thought Hellebuyck handled it respectfully. And I mean, he took exception to Scott writing about his infant son. And one thing I've learned having kids is you don't tell other people how to raise their kids. And I do see Scott's point of some of the pandemic stuff that he wrote about as well. So bit of a give and take here, but I thought it was handled professionally by all. Maybe you'd prefer it not to be live streamed on the Jets YouTube channel after the game, and you could handle it in person, but I guess, we see
there's no opportunity to do that right now.
I guess you can't really do that right now. So, I mean, that's the way that it was. So I thought Hellebuyck handled well, and see how he responds going forward. But it was certainly, I mean, everyone in here was talking about that yesterday. I mean, talking about that in chat before we even started, rather than the Jets win. So,
here's the thing. I mean, the one thing I thought was a little unfair to Hellebuyck through that entire thing was that he was asked about NHL protocols, and Murat and I remember we talked about it the next day, and I said, hey, listen, before everyone has their hot takes, go back and listen to the question and listen to the entire answer, because I don't think that was represented. Certainly, once it got to social media, what is represented fairly on social media these days? Not very much. But I mean, it was a question about the NHL protocols. I mean, the only thing I said, and listen, Scott's in a unique situation, and his experiences about this are different than everyone else's because, and I have a ton of respect for this, he has been on the front lines, covering the front lines, shall we say, and hearing how this virus has affected so many people, loss of lives, like what's happening, not to mention what's happening with the people that are dealing with it each and every day on the front lines. But to me, that doesn't have a lot to do with a guy asked about the rules at his job, which are done by a league in the National Hockey League and put together with governments, and you're seeing what's happening in other sports. I got to tell you, I think that if you went to any workplace right now where you looked at people that are in the same line of work that have different sets of rules, if you're under more stringent rules, there might be some people that say, hey, yeah, I think it's maybe a little bit too much. There are differing, social media might not tell you this, but guess what, people? There are differing opinions on this. I mean, there are echo chambers out there where people say things and they just get back the same stuff all the time. But newsflash, that's not the way the real world works. And if you go out and talk to 20 different people on the street, I'm telling you, you're going to have a few wackos on one side of things that think it's all a conspiracy. You'll have a few wackos on the other side that thinks that we should have been locked down for 2 years. And the rest of everyone is just in the middle trying to figure out what the hell is going on, get through the next day, and get back to their regular life. So no one's going to agree on all this stuff. I would prefer that we don't look to these guys and put them in any sort of a situation where we're expecting some sort of great knowledge about this sort of stuff. They're employees. That's their job. They're dealing with the rules. And that's what the question was about. So, you know, to go all of a sudden and then put an article, we're talking about, you know, kid dying in hospitals in Montreal and what's going on. I mean, that to me wasn't what the question was about. And I understand why he didn't like it. But I also understand Scott's at a really unique viewpoint. He's been working on both of these beats and he wrote what he wrote. I'm sure he 100% stands behind it. You know, that's just the way it is. So I know a lot of people were talking about it. I mean, I've kind of followed these sort of things. I think back to something that Gary told me. And again, you know, I'm not a big J journo. I was never really involved in anything like that, but being around him for so long, like, you know, when he would write a column, you know, or a few scuds, you know, at particular players because of what's going on. I mean, the one thing that you have to do is show up the next day and answer for it. And you're not putting anything in the paper or putting your name on something that you don't feel that, you know, you'll stand behind. And I'm sure Scott does that. So there hadn't been that opportunity. So sooner or later, Billeck was going to ask Hellebuyck a question. He decided, you know what? I don't have time for you because I didn't like that. And that happens all the time. It was just a little bit more public this time. But I think Scott still does a hell of a job. I agreed with that particular column. And to be honest, I don't know how this goes forward. But to me, it was something that tons of people were talking about after the game, and I know it didn't really. I'm not sure whether the IC guys talked about it. I don't think the guys on KNR talked about it last night. So I just kind of wanted to get to that because I do think that Hellebuyck, you know, you can feel whatever you want to feel about what he did and, you know, what he had to say on the topic. Bottom line was this does happen a lot of times where guys have a real issue with something that's been written about them in the media. And I thought that the way he handled it was very professional. It was cordial. Obviously, he was bent out of shape about it. And I guarantee you, Scott, I don't think is losing any sleep. And he'll be at the next press conference doing his job for the Winnipeg Sun, asking the questions he wants. And everyone will sort of move on from this.
Yeah, I think so as well. Ready? I mean, I agree with Mitch actually in chat. He said, let me scroll up here. He said, today's players are coddled by the media in comparison to the 70s and 80s, but in this case, no harm, no foul from both Scott and Helly. Both are okay, so just some reaction there from the chat. And I kind of agree. I mean, I think Scott had his column. Hellebuyck said, I don't agree with you. I'm not going to answer your question. And to be fair, Scott's question was about Karel Vejmelka. And if I'm on the Jets, I don't want to talk about Karel Vejmelka either. I'm sick of hearing about this guy. You got the win. Move on.
Oh, you know what? A great comment. Chuck, Winnipeg, with the comment of the day. Huss has the best take again. The voice of reason. Way to go, Chuck. I'm going to highlight that one going forward. Appreciate it, everyone. Anyways, just wanted to touch on that. It wasn't something we were going to lead the show with or whatever, but I know a lot of you have been talking about it in the chat, so we figured we'd get to it here today on the program. All right, we've had a ton of Jets content today, as we usually do here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Remo, slow night tonight in the National Hockey League. And hey, before we do that, I want to give a quick shout out and a big thanks to our friends over at the Nick and Nikki DQ group. And Nick and Nikki been with us since day number 1, 4 locations: DQ Niverville, DQ Northgate, Polo Park, and St. Anne's. St. Anne's is now, for you people in St. Vital, open year round, available on Skip the Dishes and Uber Eats. And you can always hit them up on Instagram if you've got a gathering, a little party coming up. DQ Manitoba on Insta. Get a little custom order for your cake for your next event, and then come by, pick it up quick and easy from our friends over at Nick and Nikki DQ. And speaking of which, there are still limited availabilities of that Jim Beam Special 2021 Grey Cup Champions glass from Jim Beam, the sister company of our friends over at Canadian Club. Canadian Club still got bonus air miles at your local Manitoba liquor marts as well, so check that out. But if you're a Bomber fan and you want to get your hands on one of those glasses, you get one free with the purchase of a bottle of Jim Beam. There was 18 displays in Winnipeg, 2 outside the city. So you might want to call your local Manitoba liquor marts to make sure they still have supplies there, but you can still get those. Big thanks to Canadian Club. Can't wait to doing some more big things with them coming up in 2022. We will get to the Coolbet lines in a minute, Remo, but as I was mentioning, slow night tonight in the National Hockey League. 2 games, Blues and Pittsburgh Penguins. But the game that I think everyone's going to be watching, Edmonton and Toronto. Wow, this is just a wild matchup tonight. 2 teams going in very different directions. Incredible heat on the Oilers, whether it's the coach, whether it's the goaltending, whether it's the general manager. And now they go into this game up against the Maple Leafs without Connor McDavid and Tyson Barrie and Derek Ryan, but missing the best player in the world. And it just seems like it is going from bad to worse right now for the Oilers. Not to mention Mikko Koskinen, after getting absolutely the bus ran over him by head coach Dave Tippett, talked about that in Finnish media. Remember the Finnish media reports back when things were going wrong with Finnish players? Yeah, Tommy Sapala got into it. So I'm fascinated to see how this goes tonight, because it has the potential for really caving in on the Oilers pretty quickly, who had that amazing start and have been one of the worst teams in the NHL over the past month plus.
Yeah, the Oilers missing McDavid and Nugent Hopkins on IR. It's not going well, and you have Tippett and Koskinen going back. Don't these guys talk? Why is Tippett calling out the goalie in the post-game press conference? So Koskinen has to go to a Finnish, or gets asked by a Finnish reporter about it. Are you in a room hashing this out? And Koskinen was saying, I think in his last 6 starts, they've scored 7 goals, which seems crazy to me. But, the top line for the Oilers has tonight, missing all those dudes. Draisaitl with Yamamoto and Warren Foegele. Second line, Ryan McLeod with Hyman and Puljujarvi. This is not looking good for Edmonton. But one thing's for sure, I mentioned Zach Hyman. I know there's no fans in the building tonight, but in case you were wondering, everything is okay. There is going to be, I saw Kevin McGran tweet this, there's going to be a Zach Hyman tribute video for his return to Toronto, signed the big free agent deal in the summer. So everything is going to be okay with the Hyman tribute, if you were wondering.
Yeah, well, listen, it's a brutal situation to do a tribute video with no fans in the building. Zach Hyman, I think, would have gotten amazing, welcome back to Toronto. He was a heck of a player, and I think is a local kid too, if I'm not mistaken, is from there as well. So bottom line is, though, this is their one game in Toronto this year. This game's not being postponed because of no fans, because, it's a national game. They need a game on Wednesday. They need a game on Saturday to be playing, and this is one that everyone will want to see. So unfortunately, it's going to be played without fans there at the Scotiabank Arena. But here's just back to Koskinen. Here was his quote. This is from Tommy Sapala. Koskinen on critics from Tippett Media. It's not nice being thrown under the bus. I have to be better, but at the same time, we scored 7 goals in my last 6 losses. I can't score goals. And listen, I understand what he's saying. Everyone's blaming me for everything. We're scoring 1 goal a game. But the bottom line is the guy's on thin ice, and he is sort of the, I think Lowtide used the word orphan, for lack of a better term, when it comes to Koskinen within the organization. He was a Peter Chiarelli. He was the he was
party
Peter
guest.
Chiarelli's final act, exactly. Giving him that contract, and fairly or unfairly, that sort of held over his head. Now, he had a 9-1 start to the season. Everyone was loving Koskinen at that point. But things are going brutal right now for the Oilers. They're looking at a lot of things, and a lot of the people that because everyone wanted to fire the coach. And we've heard a lot of people saying, well, hey, hold on a sec. Before we fire the coach, the goaltending really sucks. Mike Smith's always injured. Koskinen's been terrible lately, and it's been all on him. And I think he rightly says that, wow, listen, I need to be better, way better, frankly. But you're not winning a lot of games right now in the National Hockey League when you score one goal. And it's all going wrong for Edmonton right now, Remo. And to think that this is the game that Connor McDavid begins sitting out for COVID-19, just the worst case scenario getting worse right now. And maybe have to get Dusty on the next few days to talk about it, because his show, the text line, just talking with him off air, has been nuclear since he got back to work this week. And I don't think that surprises anyone.
Yeah, Maple Leafs minus 286 favorites. I don't know what, like, Dom has them at the percentage to win. I'm sure it's very high. But yeah, and I know, like, Koskinen hasn't been that great, let's be fair, but I mean, hey, he was just offered that sweetheart deal as a parting gift from Peter Chiarelli. But I mean, Ken Holland didn't really shore up the goaltending. I don't even know if he fixed the blue line. Bring in Duncan Keith and Cody Ceci, and I guess there's hurting from the Clefbaum long-term injury. They could definitely use him, but yeah, not going. I mean, Edmonton was so hot before, and they've really just fallen off a cliff here, and the Jets are about to catch them for playoffs.
Yeah, well, got to win games, and they'll only have one in the next week to do that. And that, of course, is tomorrow night. I am fired up for this game. I mean, we joke about the Jets' record in litmus test games because there's been a lot of tests this year. Measuring stick, but make no mistake about it, this is the team to beat in the Central Division, with all due respect to the Minnesota Wild, who are having an amazing season so far. And anyone that saw that goal that Cale Makar scored last night, I think better be tuned in tomorrow night. That was straight up, and like that was a better goal than I see on your NHL stream, Remis, and you guys are pretty good at that game.
That was pretty nasty goal on 3-on-3. Everyone's talking about that. I mean, he is on another level when it comes to offensive skill by defensemen. There was one other player who had some couple goals last night. Troy Terry had a hat trick, and
he's got 20.
He blew. No one's posting this on Twitter, but I was watching the game. I had two TVs going. May or may not have had the Mannheim Ducks players on DraftKings, but he blew by one player and just scored on a breakaway. It was pretty incredible to watch. And yeah, Anaheim completely. They didn't have Zegras. He was in COVID. They're missing a ton of guys. But I mean, we were talking how bad the Pacific was going to be, and we saw them early on. They have some young talent, as you said, led by Troy Terry. What, 20 goals? Is that what you said? And
yeah, he had 19 and 20 last night. He had that crazy start, cooled off a bit, but
incredible.
He's been one of the great stories of the year. And he all of a sudden was getting mentioned. I believe he's American. They were talking about him maybe being on the Olympic team, and I guarantee you he was not on any projected rosters heading into the season. Doesn't matter now; they're not going anyways. But yeah, no, it was. Lots going on right now in and around that.
Anaheim's second in the Pacific.
It's amazing. And you know what? Great to see for Dallas Eakins. I mean, he's dealt with a lot. And let's not forget, they don't have a GM right now either.
Yes.
I mean, Bob Murray's out. I mean, they just said that they're putting together a group that's sort of searching both, well, I mean, I guess Rutherford is basically the GM. They're looking for another guy to work underneath him. But for the Ducks, they're moving forward. Dallas Eakins running the show. Very, very young team. Trevor Zegras has been amazing. And they've been one of the nice surprises this year. But back to this game tonight, as you mentioned, yeah, Remis, you quoted it. Leafs, a huge favorite, minus 286. Maybe we jump on the miracle upset by the Oilers, plus 235. I don't know if I can get behind that. And Pittsburgh taking on the St. Louis Blues. Everyone in the Central Division would love to see the Pittsburgh Penguins win that game. Penguins minus 139 favorite, the Blues plus 118. And we do have a trade to announce as well, Remis. A little bit of a small trade, but it's funny. Anytime you have one of these kind of fringe players get traded to the Penguins, you just wonder, when's this guy going to end up scoring 25 goals along with either Sidney Crosby or Evgeny Malkin. But Alex Nylander, former top 10 pick, brother of William Nylander, is on his way from the Chicago Blackhawks to the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yeah, he's traded for exchange for Lafferty Sam. Not sure if you're familiar with him.
Sam Lafferty?
Lafferty Sam. Don't you know what is it? And Happy Gilmore when he tees off first tee at the Waterbury Open. Next on the tee, Lafferty Daniel and Gilmore Happy. So whenever I see Sam Lafferty's name mentioned, you always have to say Lafferty Sam.
Such a knob. Oh God, that's funny.
Yeah.
I guess with players coming back, they thought that they were going to have to put him off waivers and lose him. So they make a trade, and be very interesting to see what happens to Alex Nylander as to whether he can actually establish himself as an NHLer. Tell you what, couldn't be in a much better spot. We've seen a lot of players end up coming from the American Hockey League, finding themselves in Pittsburgh, getting an opportunity, and all of a sudden turning into pretty productive regulars thanks to a pretty awesome supporting cast there in the Steel City.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's like, well, Pittsburgh's trading for guys. I mean, he's going to suddenly go off him. You look at Evan Rodriguez. He was like nobody on Buffalo, having a great season now with Pittsburgh. And I did pick him up in fantasy once he got on the Crosby line. So I'm going to give myself a Barry Horowitz there, right, Huss?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, comment from BA in chat. He says, how come 97 can't elevate his wingers like 87 does? He can't elevate the third and fourth lines and third and fourth D pairs when he's not on them.
It's not McDavid's wingers that anyone's worrying about.
He can't elevate players that he's not on a line with. Come on.
Let's see who are the third and fourth line tonight for the Oilers. That's what I want to see.
Oh man, it's Devin Shore, Tyler Benson, Zach Cassian. Fourth line, Brendan Perlini, Colton Savior, and Kyle Turris. So
holy smokes! And
their D, Keith Cece, William Lagerson got his rookie card, got his young guns. I'm cheering for William Lagerson and Slater Coco. Man, a couple of these guys I didn't know they were still in the NHL.
Funny thing is, Tyler Benson. I don't know what it was. I went into one of those hockey card breaks last year with the guys over at Superstar Sports. Sort of during the pandemic, like a lot of people got sort of paying a bit more attention. Instead of buying a box, I'm like, oh, okay, I'll buy it. And, they pull it out and I got the Oilers. Well, I think out of the, I can't remember what set we were opening, but I think I've got like 6 different Tyler Benson rookie, the jersey card, a low numbered one. So tell you what, if there's ever a guy, maybe they stick Benson up playing with McDavid. Yeah. That'd be nice for the value of all those. But no one's getting put with McDavid tonight. It's going to be the Leon Draisaitl show, and in some ways, it's going to be really interesting to see what they get out of Draisaitl, because I think Draisaitl's been criminally overlooked just because he plays with McDavid and he's on the same team as the best player in the world. But he's been all-world himself, and this would be a heck of an opportunity in the center of the universe with all the Toronto media watching, talking about Austin Matthews, for Draisaitl to go, and maybe he can put the team on his back. Goalies can mix in a couple saves, and maybe we'll have an interesting game tonight. It certainly would be nice, although for folks that are cheering for the Jets and playoff position, Leafs win wouldn't break anybody's heart on the western side when you're looking at the wild card race.
No, I guess I got to start to look at them. The standings are so skewed right now looking at them just because some of these Canadian teams have had all these games postponed. They should really start doing it by points percentage. I did mention Anaheim second in the Pacific. Well, they've played 36 games. Calgary's in third, and they've played 31 games. So, although Anaheim still has the third highest points percentage in that division, but yeah, getting a bit murky here with the how to read the NHL standings. I guess we just start going by points percentage, hey?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, that's probably the easiest way to do it. I mean, what's interesting, and I mean, I'm obviously focusing mostly on the Central Division. The team that's been so far behind all year has been the Colorado Avalanche, and the Avalanche still have only had 29 games played. I mean, the Jets have played 32, and they're 3 points back, so a win tomorrow would be big to sort of stay in the mix when it comes to them, although Colorado's 8-1-1 in their last the team that is sort of shocking me right now, Remis, is the Nashville Predators. They beat Vegas last night. They're 8-1-1 in their last 10 games. And they've got 44 points on the season. And they're in first place, but as you mentioned, things aren't always as they seem. They've played 34 games. The Blues have played 33 games. So the Avalanche and Minnesota Wild, who are both at 40 points back with better points percentages, and then the Winnipeg Jets have some work to do. I mean, they've now climbed to 5 games above 500. It's definitely going to take, I think, to get to probably 12, 13 above to make it in the Central, maybe even the wild card. And heck, when you look at what's happening in the Pacific Division right now with the Kings are still doing quite well. Edmonton's in free fall. Calgary's been so-so over the last little while, although they have missed 5 games. And then I think Calgary's definitely a playoff team. Vegas definitely a playoff team. Verdict out on Anaheim. But man, I mean, with the way Edmonton's playing right now, if they don't get that turned around, they'll be on the outside looking in from the wild card. And going into the season, there was many people, myself included, that thought pretty good chance that we'd have 5 teams from the Central and only 3 teams from the Pacific. But I don't think a lot of people thought that Edmonton might be outside of both of those playoff lines.
Yep. Yeah. Yes. Sorry. I'm going to go with whatever you just said. Sorry. I was paying attention to the chat. I thought I had to throw someone over the top rope. There's been a lot of, you get into the COVID stuff, and there's a lot of chatter on chatter crime, and I'm trying to police that. People going back and forth. We don't need that in the chat. So I eventually I was like, "Hey guys, like enough." So
yeah. Well, speaking of which, let's get to one more COVID-related story before the end of the show. Novak Djokovic, is this true? He's been turned around in Australia, folks. If you're not following this, or maybe not a big tennis guy, Djokovic, number 1 player in the world, clearly the best player, heavy favorite to win the Australian Open. Somehow got some sort of medical exemption to enter Australia as an unvaccinated player. And Australia, if you probably don't know this, has had some of the strictest lockdowns in the world. They've done it 5 or 6 times. And essentially, when this news came out, there was an incredible amount of public outrage. And now, while he got it from the federal government, I guess the state that this is happening is not having any in it. And I'm not sure how this finishes up right now, but I can tell you, Reem, that the Coolbet odds for the Australian Open came down pretty quickly. And I know I was just kind of going at it with a few people on Twitter yesterday, posted up Denis Shapovalov at 69-1. He's got to made it to the quarters. Great hard court player. Looked like there's some value there. If Djokovic is out of the tournament, this odds board tomorrow will look completely different than what it did yesterday, and everyone's number is going to take a beating because, of course, he is the odds-on smart money favorite to win another Grand Slam championship if he can play.
I think people are sick of seeing other people get unequal treatment, and Djokovic got the medical exemption to play in the tournament, but I guess didn't get the exemption to come to the country. So he's been, detained, as you said. I mean, well, I don't know what's going to happen, but I messaged you about it. You're like, "Oh, this is so good." Your first reaction was classic. "Oh, this is so good for the odds boards. I got bets on everyone but Djokovic. So this is incredible, as Djokovic is going to be a huge favorite." That was my favorite part when I messaged you about the whole thing.
Oh, really? We've got Shapo at 69-1. That's going to go down to like 30 if Djokovic is out of the.
There was major backlash. I guess because it was like what they didn't really say why this guy would get an exemption, like because he's the number 1 tennis player and they want people to watch the tournament. Was that the reason why?
What was the medical exemption exactly?
Yeah.
And again, God knows. I mean, the last thing we want to do is be discussing the validity of whatever medical exceptions. One thing, we are not doctors here, so we'll just play it by ear. But it is a huge sports story, and Djokovic, of course, has made a lot of comments that many people found insensitive about the pandemic, and then had that tournament where they basically, like right at the height of the explosion of it, where their given F level was below 0 if it's possible. They were clubbing, they were all over themselves, dancing with no shirts on, and then lo and behold, half the tournament got COVID.
Yeah, he had that big super spreader event in 2020. It was a bad look at the time, so I don't think people have sympathy for him, no matter how good he is at tennis. So that is something we're going to be following. There's one other Bombers note, Huss. I know we're about to wrap up. They did sign Jake Thomas, the longest tenured Bomber, to another 1-year extension.
I'm going to fire something out to DC, see if we can maybe get Jake on the show in the next couple days. He was the guy that got the Grey Cup first last year. And to be honest, Reem, and I think I said this on the show afterwards, and this is full respect to Nick Dembski and Andrew Harris. And Dembski, of course, had that amazing touchdown, was such a huge play. Part of me thinks that Jake Thomas got a little bit robbed as the top Canadian. He had a huge game against Hamilton. And sometimes people don't pay as much attention to what's happening on the line. A number of tackles, quarterback rushes, a big sack for the club. And I'm sure he was in consideration sometimes the offensive guys get a little bit more love than the big guys on the defensive line. But the longest serving Bomber is back, 2 Grey Cups down. See if he can get 3. And we'll look forward to hopefully getting Jake on in the next day or 2 on the program to discuss it. But great signing. I have a feeling over the course of this next little while, almost on a daily basis, we'll be hearing another 1 or 2 players coming back to the Bombers as Kyle Walters tries to, bring back as many people from this championship squad. Of course, the guys that we're probably expecting won't be back right now. DeAndre Alford, who's getting plenty of NFL interest. And we talked about Drew Desjardins, who has a number of teams lining up to inquire about him, including the New England Patriots.
Yeah, the Paul Friesen actually caught up with Alford, who's been touring around. He was with the Falcons, Falcon. I think it's Falcons. Is that
Falcons?
what it is?
Yes, I know. There has been some linguistics
someone
experts
got mad.
that have been
Someone got mad. Yeah, that I was saying it incorrectly. But yeah, he's been touring around. So it sounds like he's going to go to the NFL and Desjardins, as you mentioned, as well. So the CFL transaction-wise, I agree. So we'll see something probably daily on that, and we'll see what the Bomber defense looks at.
Miller Time 1980, when we were talking about the Super Spread event, sounds like that Sunwing flight.
Yeah.
Have you heard about this?
During the chat.
I just heard about it. Apparently, when the Prime Minister gets involved, not a good look, certainly for Sunwing or the people. I guess the minute they got over the border, they thought that everything was over and they could go nuts and party. I don't know whether it was loud. I don't really have any of the details.
I saw a video.
It was interesting hearing the Prime Minister talk about a bunch of vacationers heading to Mexico in the middle of the pandemic.
It was a bunch of influencers on a plane who were smoking and drinking. I haven't looked too much into it, but I mean, if you're going to do that, I don't know, maybe don't share it on social media. But I mean, then if you're not sharing it on social media, are you really an influencer? So
does it even happen?
Yeah, did it even happen? I agree.
Well, although they probably would prefer that this stuff didn't happen as much as they were having fun on it. I'm sure we can follow all their socials throughout the trip in Mexico, but they might have some explaining to do when they come back.
The good news for them is they got to their destination on time. Usually when Sunwing is in the news, it's because people are stuck on a plane for 24 hours and can't use the bathroom.
Eric Charlifson in all caps, flu answers. Yeah. I see what you did there, Eric. Nicely done. Oh man, it was worth the trip down the Twitter rabbit hole just for the laughs, says Wrench Doozer. Hey, awesome show. Oh, and by the way, shout out to the GFL. Gregory mentioning Jake Thomas. Big day today so far for him, and I did see this as well on Twitter. He's busy closing houses. Yes, he's involved in real estate away from football. Closed 2 houses today on top of the CFL extension. So great insider info from our man Gregory Liverpool, and a big congratulations to Jake Thomas. And we will hopefully get Jake on the program, hopefully this week, but at some point soon. I can't talk to Bomber players enough about the offseason, but mostly to relive that amazing Sunday and run to a second consecutive Grey Cup. It's going to do it for us today, folks. Thanks to everyone that's been with us in the YouTube chat, everyone that's been with us listening on the podcast. Big thanks to Daniel Fink, as well as Murat for joining us, and everyone that's entertaining us in the chat. As always, thanks to our sponsor crew, including the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Coolbet Canada, Canadian Club, Princess Auto, Little Brown Jug, Boston Pizza, Royal Sports, Not Autocorp, Manitoba Battery, Culligan Water, Vita Health, and F Apparel. We'll be back tomorrow. Big show, getting ready for, I think, a game that many of us have had circled on the calendar before. And that was even before the games on the weekend were postponed. The Jets' last game for a week, 8 o'clock tomorrow, going up against a very, very good divisional rival in the Colorado Avalanche. We'll be all over it starting at 1 o'clock live on YouTube and in your podcast feed in time for your ride home from work tomorrow afternoon. Have a great one. Stay warm. Stay inside. It's brutal outside. We'll be back tomorrow on WST. Have a great night, everybody.
Oh, my God. Oh! Shut it down. Let's go home.
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.